Hello everyone, just coming on. I got my snack right here in the middle of the way, rushing around. I made some zucchini bread today and it's really yummy, really yummy. So while I wait for some people to come in, I am going to eat my snack. I made some homemade zucchini bread today and it is yummy, yummy, yummy. We're going to work on gloves today. I'm going to show you how you can make things without a pattern. All you need is your yarn label, the yarn, recommended hook size or needle size. We're going to be doing knitting today, so we're going to need knitting needles, and a tape measure. We're going to do a little math, a little measurements, and I'm going to show you how to make gloves, how to make fingerless gloves, and how to make mittens. It's all in the same order. You just cast off in different areas for the different gloves. So anyone who wants to learn how to make gloves today, we'll give you a few minutes to grab some yarn, needles. Make sure your yarn has a label on it so I can assist you with the yarn weights. I will go over several different yarn weights. I'm going to be using, this is sport weight, and I'm going to be using a US size 4 knitting needle. If you want to use worsted weight, you want to use one of the recommended needles for the worsted weight, depending on how loose or tight you knit. And we will get started here in just a few minutes. This zucchini bread is so good. I wished I could send you all some zucchini bread. It is yummy. The first measurement that you are going to want to make, and I'm just going to draw a little hand out here just so I don't have to do too much around my own hand, so that I have it for the tape measure. You are going to measure around the wrist of your hand here. To get started, you need to know the circumference, so that way we can figure out our stitch count. And I know many times you've heard me talk about stitch count and being able to start things and having matching stitch counts. You don't have to do it super tight, because you know your gloves aren't always super tight. You want to be able to have a little bit of wiggle room there. So we're looking at 6 3/4. We can go all the way up to 7 inches, or we can go 6 1/2, which would be a little tight. You see I'm pulling in here, so I'm probably just going to go up to a 7-inch glove just to even off the inches. Okay. It's going to be a little looser, but just to make our inches even so that we can do the math a little bit easier. So I have a 7-inch wrist. We're going to mark that down on our piece of paper. You don't have to draw a hand. You can write wrist or just mark down your 7 inches. Everything I'm doing here is just for the visual learners. So we have 7 inches. And I'm using a marker because it just stands out a little bit better when you're writing. So on your yarn label, you're going to look to see, and it should give you in knitting, if I can get this to zoom in on this here and not everything in the background. It should give you needle sizes 3 through 5, and 6 stitches on any one of those sets of needles should give you an inch. They give you a 3 needle span because some people knit loose, some people knit tight, but either a 3, 4, or 5 US size knitting needle should give you an inch. This is what they call gauge as well. You can do a gauge swatch to see how tight you knit, and I can describe that to you later if anyone has need of that information. I did think I did do that in another video. But, so, 6 stitches equals 1 inch. Here I'm getting ready to write inches. So you're going to take your stitch count and multiply it by the number of inches that you need. That's 42. Okay? You are going to need to cast on 42 stitches in this yarn to give you a 7-inch cuff on these. Hello, Karen. How are you, honey? I wasn't paying too attention to the comments as I was describing this math here. I'm going to run back through and make sure I didn't miss anybody else. I want to welcome everyone. We're going to make some gloves today. Hello, Hoarder Ace. This is just rolling past me here as I'm running off at the mouth. All right. So we need to cast on 42 stitches in the yarn, this yarn here that I'm using, to get our stitch count. Now, you can do this with any yarn. It's on the label. If you're using worsted weight yarn, once you have your measurement, then you go to your yarn label. If you're using worsted weight yarn, you want to use a US size 8 knitting needles, and it says here, and we're going to have to do a little bit more math on this label because it's got 4 inches. 17 stitches will give you 4 inches, so you have to divide 17 by 4. That's roughly 4 stitches an inch. So here, for worsted weight, it would be 4 stitches equals 1 inch. This here is sport weight per the label. Okay, 6 stitches for sport weight. So if anybody's using anything smaller than that, you just plug in the numbers that you need to. Worsted weight would be the 4 stitches times your 7 inches, which would be 28 stitches for worsted weight. So we're going to go ahead and cast on the number of stitches we need and get started here. If anyone needs a description again of that, I will be posting this live to YouTube. Excuse me, after TikTok is done processing it. Sometimes it takes the same amount of time to record it as it does to process it. So it might be a couple hours after I get off before it's uploaded to YouTube to go back. So I'm going to fold this in half and move the rest of this paper out of the way as I continue with my snack and what we're doing here. That way, this is still here for anybody to look back at, see if they need to after they looked at their yarn label or whatever. I'll leave it out here on the desk. And I know I'm probably going to get a lot of questions about it, so it'll be okay. I'm working on circular needles just for space, but we are going to be working flat. We are going to be, let me mark this down here. And I did put knitted gloves right there, so we're making gloves. We are going to do fingerless. And I hope I'm not too loud because I'm right up in front of this phone. Fingerless gloves. I'm also going to show you mittens. And full finger gloves with all 5 fingers. Make sure we put that clarity on there, and I know that's all crammed together. I don't want to get banned for using the wrong words in concession with other words. So I have some. This is a Journey tweed from Knit Picks. It's called Safari. It's a really pretty color. I went ahead and caked it up. It actually came in a hank and not a skein. And this is a sport weight yarn. I like to cake these up right before I use them, because sometimes when you cake them up from a hank and leave them sit for a while. If you cake them up too tight, the yarn will stretch. And then, you know, if you have a little bit of elasticity in there, it's pretty much gone. You know, your nylon content and things like that. And here I have a knot. That's one of the other reasons why I cake up my yarn before I use it, even if it's in a center pull skein, because I like to be able to keep knitting right on through or crocheting right on through. I do not like having to stop, pull out knots, untie where they've tied two pieces of string together to keep the, you know, to keep the skein going. I like to remove all obstacles before I get started. And that way I know that I'm not going to run into something. I did pull a skein apart and it had like 3 cut ends. I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on, but yeah. I had a couple long lengths, but there was 3 different cuts in that skein. It was unreal. So I'm going to show, yes, I am on YouTube. If you go to my profile page on TikTok, right above my videos, there is a Linktree link. If you click on that, it will take you, there's all the links there that I use pattern-wise for my Instagram, my YouTube, my Facebook Messenger, if you need to send me a picture of your work because you need help. Any of the links that I use are all there. So, and all of those links will take you directly to any other of my social media accounts and YouTube. And all my instructional videos and the excuse me. And the instructional videos that I make, I upload to YouTube. The lives that are instructional like this one will go to YouTube. Thank you for the follows, everyone. I appreciate it. I do also teach a class on Knit and Crochet Basics Tuesday right here on TikTok. Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're going to do a long tail cast on. It's a nice stretchy cast on, and you want to have a stretchy cast on for a glove because we're going to do a ribbing on this glove. So I'm just going to pull a little bit back this way. We have the cut end towards me and the end going to the skein away from me. I will drape them across my fingers just like this. The cut end over my thumb, the end going to the skein over my index finger. It's very important you have them in that order because if not, you will run out of tail and it's just, this is the way it's done. So I grab these strings together like this and hold them in my hand and create like almost like a little slingshot type design here. I'm going to take my knitting needle and stick it in between my hand and the yarn. I'm going to press it against the yarn and twist it so that my needle is now facing up. That is stitch number 1. Good afternoon, baby girl. That is stitch number 1. Now, to do the long tail cast on, once you get the fluid motion of this, you don't have to do everything that I'm telling you now. This is just to show you, because I'm not there physically, where your needle needs to be, which direction it needs to go as you're weaving your way through this yarn that's here in your hands now. I use this finger right here, this index finger, to hold this so it doesn't slide off as I'm moving my needle around. So I'm going to come to the meaty part of my thumb here, and I'm going to run my needle up my thumb, which you can see it's grabbing the first string of the yarn here, or actually just going through the loop that's created on my thumb. Now I'm going to take the point of my needle and stick it on the pad of my index finger, and I'm going to run it down my finger. See, it's going behind that second string now. Then I'm going to bring my needle back over to my thumb and I'm going to run it back down my thumb, which essentially takes it back down through that loop that you've created on your thumb. And you now have stitch number 2. We're going to take our thumb, hold your stitches here, take our thumb out and use it to tighten up. Not real tight, just kind of snug. You still want it to be able to slide up and down the needles without an issue. Okay, so snug it up, but not super tight. Again, if you happen to drop your yarn, the string going to the cut end goes over your thumb. The string that's going towards the skein goes over your index finger. And you bring those all back together underneath. Again, up your thumb, down your finger, back over to your thumb and down your thumb. Hold your stitch, snug it up on your needles. Okay, if anyone needs me to show that again, I do have 42 of those to do, actually 39 now. So if you need to see it again, just let me know. I will slow down and show it to you again. Okay, and I do a little bit more fluid motion because I don't have to, I know which direction I need to go, and after you learn, you know, after it becomes habit, it's pretty much just easy to do. The more you practice, the easier anything gets to do. And we're just going to, for me it's 42 stitches. For you it depends on what weight yarn you're using, what size needle you're using. And as I go through, I'm going to do just a plain standard glove, and we are going to be working these flat. We are not going to work these in the round. These will be worked flat. For those, everybody knows how to, not everybody knows how to work in the round. Not everybody knows how to knit flat. That's probably why you're here, to learn how to knit. So I'm going to teach you how to do it flat. For those of you who want to do these in the round, when we get to the point to where you can put them in the round, I will tell you that you can put them in the round, but I'm going to continue to work flat. Alright, I'm going to count how many stitches I have here now. Alright, we need 10 more. 10 more stitches. And I think the reason why they call it long tail cast on is sometimes you have too long of a tail left over. There is a scientific way to figure out how to do this. I don't do any of that. I just pull out some and keep going. Now, there is a way that if you don't pull out a long enough tail, say your tail ended right here and you still needed 10 more stitches, you can put more cast on stitches using this right here, and I can show you how to do that now. If you run out of your long tail and you don't want to pull this off, say you've got 200 stitches casted on and you only need 10 more, I wouldn't pull off 200 stitches to put 10 more stitches on. If you have to add more stitches on at this point, what you are going to do, if your long tail is too short for the more experienced knitter, okay, or the people who are just learning now, you are going to go in just like you're going to perform a knit stitch. Go to the left side of your stitch, into the hole that's created by it being wrapped around the needle, and your needle goes to the back side. Your yarn is also to the back side because you're performing a knit stitch. Okay? You're going to go and do just like you're going to do a knit stitch, but instead of leaving it on this needle and knocking this off, you're going to take this and put it right on here. And there is another knit stitch casted on. And you can keep going until you have the number of stitches you need if you run short on your long tail cast on. If this runs short and you don't have enough tail to keep casting on more, you can cast them on that way. You can fasten your yarn on and do all of your stitches that way. It's not a very stretchy cast on, so I only use it if I have to do just a few more stitches. So it's not, if you don't need a stretchy cast on, you can cast it on just like that for the whole way. I'm going to cut some of this off because it's just too much string dangling down back there. Now, because we are working these flat and I have 42 stitches, one thing I am going to do so that I don't have to count my stitches later, I'm going to go over 11 stitches and put a stitch marker on my needle itself. Not 11, 21, I'm sorry. So right there, right where my finger was. Now I will tell you why. Let me pull a stitch marker out from over here. I am putting a stitch marker on here. When we go to do what is called the thumb gusset, to make room for your thumb in this glove, we are going to want to start in the middle when we are working it flat. When you are working it in the round, it's still going to be in the middle. And I like to mark it that way. I don't have to figure it out later on as I'm going through. And I'll have to check and make sure that that didn't go through any of that thread. Push that back on there before it falls off. Okay, I have 42 stitches casted on. And I have my stitch marker in the middle there. I think it's in the middle. Yep, I have it positioned in the middle. So that way when I go to start my thumb gusset, I will be able to start that without issue. One other thing that you're going to need that I'll have you pull out before we get started, you are going to need an additional stitch marker. Because when we start doing the thumb gusset, we are going to need to mark the start and the finish. So that way we know where to do our increases. We're actually going to be doing knitted increases for the thumb gusset. Okay. You can get fancy with the thumb gusset and do right leaning and left leaning increases. I didn't research that before I came on here to know exactly how, and off the top of my head I can't figure it out. So we're just going to do a regular invisible increase and work it that way. Oh, Stormy, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm glad that I can pass something on, inspire creativity in somebody else, you know, help somebody financially with knowing how to do this so that they can help themselves. Everybody likes the feeling of being able to help yourselves and do it yourself. And just, you know, giving these types of skills, it's a great big ego booster too, because I can take this and make it look like something amazing. So can anybody else. But thank you. Thank you. Let's see here. Give me just a second and we'll get started. There we go. We are going to be doing a knit 1, purl 1. Actually, we're going to do a knit 2, purl 2 rib. I like a little bigger rib when I'm doing things like this. So, and when I get this first row done, I'm going to measure. Actually, we're going to have to do a couple of rows before it's going to measure 7 inches because it does expand from your cast on a little bit. So, first row, we're going to knit 2, purl 2. A knit stitch, you go to the left hand side of the stitch here and go through. Needle goes to the back. Your yarn is also to the back of your work or away from you. And you're going to perform this stitch. Okay? Now we're going to do 2 purl stitches. So we're going to have to bring our yarn to the front, and to do that, and yes, I'm working with 2 strands because I work in my ends as I go along, so I don't have a whole lot of extra weaving. You're just going to bring your yarn to the front in between your needles. Don't bring it over the outside or out around this other one. Right, both of them, right in between. Okay? Purl stitch goes into the stitch from the right to the left, and the needle stays to the front. And again, you already brought your yarn to the front. Tanya, if you go to my TikTok profile page, right above all my videos is a Linktree link. In that Linktree link is access to all the patterns that I share off of Pinterest for free that are from other creators. They are free, so if it says at the bottom that I can't share it, then I probably won't use it. But yeah, every access that I have given you guys to get a hold of me one way or the other is all there in that Linktree link on my TikTok profile. If you follow me on YouTube, please subscribe. There is no cost to subscribe to me here on TikTok or YouTube. Please don't waste your money like that. All of my videos are open and available to everyone. Everyone. Just make sure that when you subscribe or follow me on anything that you go under the notifications and select all. It is default setted to personalized, so you will not get all notifications if you don't select that. And on YouTube, I think it's a little bell you select. Now, when we come to this stitch marker, we're not going to do anything fancy with it. We're just going to slide it over to the other needle. Just slide it right on over. And I did choose to use sport weight yarn, which is a lot thinner than worsted weight, so it's... Why did I do that? And we got to do another knit stitch. Knit 2, purl 2. I tried to purl too soon. Abram, this is a circular knitting needle. The needles are connected by a cable. Most knitting needles only come in 14-inch lengths, and it's kind of hard to make a blanket, such as a twin-size blanket that might be, I think it's 45 inches across for a twin-size blanket? 40 inches on a 14-inch needle. So therefore they created these circular knitting needles. Once I get this row done, I'll push it back so you can see. I don't have another set up here to be able to show you. It's connected by a cable so that you can do more stitches than would just, a 14-inch knitting needle would accommodate. You can only fit so many stitches on, 14-inch knitting needle. Okay, and I think what I'm going to do on these last 2 stitches, on these last 4 stitches, I need to create a few more stitches because my rib is not going to come out even, because when I do sew this together, I'm going to have 2 knit stitches and 2 knit stitches together, and it's not going to look very nice. So we are going to back up even more, and I'm going to add just 2 more stitches in here on these knit ones. I'm going to knit in the front and the back of this one knit stitch. You can increase 2 because you're going to have the same issue. So you're going to want to evenly increase 2 stitches. So these next 2 will be purl. Okay. Next 2 stitches I'm going to purl. This is just a little self-correction. This one here should knit, so I'm going to knit in the front and the back. And then the last 2 I'm going to purl. That way I end in purls, I started in knits. When I go to sew this together, my ribs will match up. I won't have a wide space of knit stitch, 4 stitches wide sewed together. And it'll go all the way up that rib. So, Abram, the knitting needles are attached to a plastic cable or a metal cable that's coated with plastic. And it goes from one side to the other. It just allows you to have more than, and most of these start at 16 inches. They have some ones for socks that are only like 9 inches long. Yeah, cast on 44 instead of 42 if you're using sport weight yarn. If you're not using sport weight yarn and you're using worsted, good afternoon, Meredith, how are you? If you're not using sport weight and you're using worsted weight to make the gloves following along, you want to use 4 stitches, and that's for a 7-inch wrist. So if your wrist is bigger than 7 inches, you're going to have to do a little bit different math. But per the label on worsted weight, on the needles recommended, now you'd have to do a gauge swatch if you're unfamiliar with your gauge on certain needles and certain yarn. After, 40 plus years of knitting, you know what your gauge is, so you know how many stitches you can get per inch on any specific needle with any specific yarn. It just becomes second nature. So, yeah, 44 stitches if you're working with sport weight and a size 4 needle. Now, as we go along, of course, we're going to be working knit 2, purl 2 rib for about an inch. We're going to do about an inch. Okay, so as we're working along, I'll talk a little bit about needles, and we'll probably have to do about 4 to 6 rows to get an inch. It also, again, depends on whether you are using worsted weight, sport weight. You can make gloves out of fingering weight yarn if you want to. Again, it's all math, just figuring out how many stitches you need to cover the amount of space that you're trying to cover. And you can do this for anybody. Little baby hands, big baby hands, medium baby hands, it doesn't matter. So you can make this from newborn all the way up to the biggest adult hand you've ever seen in your life. Doing it this way, I can't really tell you how much yarn you may or may not need. Again, I'm sliding my center stitch marker over just so I know where I'm going to start my thumb gusset when I get started. I'm doing really, really good today. Yes, I will definitely see you, and hopefully you enjoy your afternoon as well. Meredith is super, super busy getting ready for a market in August. She is in Ohio. I'll have to get all the details from her so I can shout her out throughout the rest of this month and the week prior to her. Yeah, I do need to move that marker over one. Thank you for the reminder. Yes, I do. I do. Thank you so much. I would have caught on to it. It's not very, very drastic that I don't move it, but depending on where that is, I'd like to have things set up proper. I like to mark the center, to put my thumb in the center. That way, when I put the gloves together, the seam goes on the outer side of the glove. So, if I don't recenter this, and one stitch isn't going to make a big deal. I mean, if it's like 10, 12, your seam starts to move back over towards the top of your glove or back towards the bottom side of your hand. And, if this is your true center where your thumb's going to be, then are all of your fingers in the right space, and is your seam in the where you want it? It's not too drastic of an issue. Because if you can seam things together pretty well knit-wise, you don't have that much of a seam anyway. Variegated yarn is pretty forgiving for, helping you to hide your seams. So, yeah, I do that a lot too. But we will move it over because I'm right in the middle of a knit and a purl right now. So I do need to move it 1, 2, this way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It's not a big deal, one stitch. It's not going to move your seam too much. But if you're pretty particular and you can get kind of, and not to hurt anybody's feelings, because I can get pretty OCD about my crafting and what I put my name on as well. I want to make sure that it's nice, it looks nice, and it's done nice, and if it's not professional, you don't want to put it on your table. You don't want to put your name on it. You don't want anybody to know you made it. That kind of thing. I was talking with a friend of mine today. She's working, we're working together on that Lord of the Rings double knitted blanket. And she had to pull back almost 10 rows because she was unhappy with the way some of the color corrections that she had to make came out, and that was like 10 rows worth of work. And she was going to pull it all the way out, and I helped her to not have to do that. But yeah, if you can, if something bothers you that much that you have crafted, that you just sit there and look at it and you're like, oh, should I even continue? It's time to go ahead and either, do your best to work it back to where the problem is, or if it's just too much work to do that, just start over. And I've done it a lot. When I was in my 20s and 30s and crafting, it used to make me mad to make mistakes like that. And I would get so frustrated. And now it's part of the journey. It's part of the journey. If you're working on stuff and you are not at least a little bit challenged by the pattern, even if it's your own pattern, you need to up your skills a little bit, challenge yourself. I do that all the time. When I go to make a pattern, something that I look at and really want to make, I know we're not quite to an inch yet, but I'm loving these colors on here. It's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. And I know I got off track because the colors caught me off guard. And they say I don't have ADHD. I think I do. Some form of. And again, I forgot to put my arm cushion on here, and my arms are letting me know that it's not under here. Let me grab my cushion. And again, I'm going to give several different, as the ideas come to me, which they normally do, as I'm showing you guys how to do things, I will share them with you. Little details that you can put in here that, you can have a plain section. You can run the rib all the way up if you want to. I'm not going to do that because it's going to be a little quicker for me to knit and purl. Do knit rows and purl rows than it would be to knit and purl. It slows you down a little bit when you have to do another step. Yarn to the front, yarn to the back, every couple of stitches. I think we got about 4 rows on here now, working on it. We're going to go to 6 and see. That should be close to an inch, because I didn't drop that one right off. Didn't go through the stitch. Make sure I got both of them on there. Yeah. But I'm doing 2 knits, 2 purls, all the way across 44 stitches with sport weight yarn on a US size 4 needle. I had a sweater completed, and I had, instead of making the individual pieces, I don't like sewing, so I'll work the back of a sweater, and then whatever it says is the stitch count for the front, I'll divide that off of each edge and keep going off the back and not have shoulder seams. Then when I get that done, I will find out where the center is on the shoulder seams, and I will center my stitches for the sleeves on there, and I will pick them up right off the sweater and sew the sleeves right onto the sweater. What happened was, when I did the stitch count for the fronts, I did the stitch count for a medium, and I had the extra large size for the back of the sweater. I did not discover this until I had finished the collar band, and I had to take the collar band out, the sleeves out, and both of the sweater fronts. So I was all the way back to the back from it being totally finished. I know what it's like to have to frog a project. Yeah, it breaks your heart. It breaks your heart to have to pull it out. My husband's seen me yank projects off the needles and just start pulling string, and he'll look at me, and I can see it in his eyes. He says, I know it breaks your heart to pull out all of that hard work. And I was like, yeah, it does. But it would break my heart even more to have that work sit around here and stare me in the face because I couldn't put it for sale. Even if, like at the fancy stores, they have the ugly fruit and vegetable bin for the fruit that's misshapen, I would be ashamed to even stick it in that box. So yeah, it comes to the point that you have to take it out. Thank you for the heart, Jay. Is it Jason? I'm sorry, Jason. Thank you, thank you. Yep, down to nothing and started it over. I've had to do that before too because you messed up something on the first 2 rows. Yeah, and you're, on like 5 to 10 rows from the finish line. You can see the little checkered flag waving, and it just, it's you're not going to hit it today. Yeah, things like that happen. I'm going to stop and measure after this row because I look like I'm getting close to 1 inch. And then we're going to be working what's called stockinette stitch. If you want to continue the rib, you can continue the rib. It'll give you a nice stretchy glove. I had a glove over here that I was working on. I have to do the second one on. And, got to bring our yarn to the front to do a purl. I did a video last night. I had to pull 5 rows out off of the Lord of the Rings blanket. I don't know if you guys saw it, but got it back on the needles last night. I haven't picked it back up yet. And you can see here we're getting a nice, really nice, and it'll be stretchy, knit 2, purl 2 rib going on. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, your phone froze up. Sorry about that. Yeah, we'll be here for a while. But we're getting a nice knit 2, purl 2 rib going on here. And I'm going to take my little handy dandy tape measure, and I know we're not up to 1 inch now looking at it. We're 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to do 2 more rows on here of knit 2, purl 2 rib. When you get to 1 inch, if you want to keep going with the stockinette, just keep going with the stockinette stitch. Now mind you, one other measurement that we should have made was wherever you want your cuff to start, your thumb gusset should start right around here where your thumb starts poking out at your wrist. So we are probably only going to do a total of, 2 inches. See the 2 inch mark here? We're only going to do about 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, before we have to start doing that thumb gusset, because the thumb gusset will cover from here to here. You will increase in these spaces here to make your thumb gusset. I'm showing you how, from measurement and yarn label, you can make a pair of gloves. I will go over again while everybody's working on their knit 2, purl 2 rib, and I can talk while I'm doing this. On worsted weight yarn on the label, using a US size 8, I think it was, you can get 4 stitches per inch. You have to measure around your wrist to see how many inches around you need. My wrist is 7 inches around. I'm using sport weight yarn, and sport weight yarn says that it's 6 stitches per inch on a 3, 4, or 5 size knitting needle, US sizes. So I take the 6 stitches and times it by the 7 inches, because I need 6 stitches per inch and I need 7 inches. That's 42 stitches. Now, because knit 2, purl 2 rib, we need to make sure that we end in a purl and not a knit. We were going to end in a knit, so we had to add 2 extra stitches. I added them on the first row by knitting in the front and back of 1 knit stitch and increased it there towards the end. I didn't wait till I got all the way to the end. But if you have, just simply because it's an OCD thing, I could have left it at 42 stitches and had 2 knit rows going together, but it would be a wider stripe of these two stitches, and you wouldn't have this purl gap in between, so you'd have this and this together at your seam, and that would bug me to no end, so I had to fix it. Oh, it's 12:30. I have to go back in here and pull more zucchini bread out of the oven. So y'all continue on your knit 2 purl 2 rib for an inch. Once you get done that inch, if you're already done that inch, we are going to knit on one side and purl on the other side. So you'll knit all the way across, and when you turn it, you'll purl all the way across. Make sure that you keep knitting on the knit side and purling on the purl side. I gotta go get that bread out of the oven, and I will be right back. Okay, sorry about that, but couldn't let that bread burn up in the oven for sure. No, no, no. It's too yummy. A lot of people do not know how to knit in the round. Now, I should have told you this. For those who want to knit in the round, at the cast on, you could have joined it together, but you need smaller needles, double-pointed needles. A sampler shawl. I would love to do one of those. Crocheted sampler blankets, sampler shawls, knitted. I love things like that. Patchwork. I just finished a Ronald Weasley blanket not too long ago and put an I-cord border on it. But it was all, excuse me, garter stitch squares. I'm going to make y'all hungry for a minute. I got to share this with you. Look at this zucchini bread. I cut it up and this is just absolutely yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. And that's what I had in the oven. It's a real sweet bread. I might do a little photo video on it if anyone's interested in the, it is luscious. It is, I mean, there's not a whole lot of ingredients. It's just so super moist. I love it. You can see how, and it's not spongy. It's just like a really moist cake. It's yummy. If anybody's interested in the recipe, I will do. Taking a screenshot of my notes. If you need to take a screenshot, sure. Yes. I just pulled 2 loaves out of the oven. It was the second batch. I got 5 loaves of zucchini bread in the kitchen. Oh my, that's a lot of work, Jason. That's a lot of work. All right. Now, let me see what we have here, because I got up and got to talking and got away. I want to make sure I got an inch here on my rib. Yep, we got an inch on the rib, so we're going to go ahead and start doing our knit row and purl row. And we're going to do about another half an inch, from the cast on edge. So you want to do about 1.5 inches. If you want your glove down a little further on your arm, make it a little longer. Now, this area here where I'm going to be just doing knits all the way across and purls on the other side. If you want to put patterns in there, you can put patterns in there. If you want a more springy glove, you can put lace work in there. Whatever you want to do, as long as it matches your stitch count. Now, mind you, coming off the rib, if you need a couple extra stitches to make stitch count to put a pattern in, that's the best place to do it. On the first row do a row of knit before you start your pattern, or evenly increase across the last, well, it would be hard to evenly increase across the last row because you're going to change your rib up. Your rib's not going to end off right. So I would do a row of knit and add your extra stitches, and then go ahead, do your row of purl, and then start your pattern if you wanted to put a pattern in there. Cables, like I said, if you wanted to continue to run the rib right on up. I do like the ribbed fingerless gloves. They're like second skin, but they're not tight. They don't cut your circulation off, and they're really comfy. I do wear a lot of fingerless gloves when it gets cold because I have health issues that cause limited and poor circulation, that kind of stuff. So I do extra layers and things like that to stay warm when it gets colder. Sometimes even in the summertime, I'll be freezing like it's winter outside. I have 2 pairs of socks on trying to keep my feet warm. It's ridiculous. Different shades of blue and green. Are you talking about the yarn here? I didn't see the rest of the comments. Compression gloves, yeah. Oh, you're making zucchini bread. I got zucchini fresh from an Amish farmer that lives down the street from me. Oh, we're doing straight purl row here. I'm trying to go back to rib. But yeah, I got from of course, I live out in farm country anyway, in Pennsylvania. And I just love the fact that there's fresh farm markets everywhere out here. My sister called me today. She's getting a bunch of free veggies. And she asked if I wanted to make some spaghetti sauce. I told her, heck yeah. So I'll be getting a big bunch of tomatoes here soon, and I'll be making spaghetti sauce to put away. She getting ready to can some tomatoes and spaghetti sauce and pizza sauce. I'm like, oh my goodness, she's going to be busy. Busy, busy, busy. So yeah, in this portion here, if you want to start a pattern, you can start a pattern. When we start increasing for the thumb gusset, even if I'm doing knit 2, purl 2, rib, I try to stay in pattern. If you want your thumb gusset to just be flat, you can do garter stitch in between the stitch markers, or you can do stockinette stitch in between the stitch markers, which gives you a nice definite, this is the thumb gusset in your glove. Sometimes it's nice to break the details up, when you're doing gloves with, with the thumb gusset and all that kind of stuff. I'm just knitting. I can knit pretty fast. Something that I challenged myself to do. I was working on an interlac project in knitting, and I know a lot of people don't know what that is, but you work little squares. You do short rows, and then you work your way across, and you make a square, and then you go and make another square. Then you just keep going all the way across. You have to turn your work for every little square that you make. So if you're only working 10 stitches or 5 stitches for an interlac square, you're turning your work pretty often. So I learned how to knit backwards. And right now, if I didn't want to turn this work and I wanted to knit back across this row to the other side, I could without turning my work. You discover little things as you get more seasoned in the craft, things that make it easier for you to do what you need to do to get a project done in a timely manner without a whole lot of fuss. Because that's kind of the goal, especially if you're using it as a financial tool to get that stuff made and out the door. So I want to measure this here after I get done this row. When I do measure my knitting, I measure from the cast on row, and I measure to immediately underneath the needles. I don't measure over the top of the needles because those stitches are a little oversized on those needles. When they come off those needles, they do minimize down just a little bit, not a whole lot, but they relax and everything evens out. So measure to immediately underneath the needles when you're making your work, and you will never go wrong. But the stitches on the needle do count as a row. So if you're counting your rows, you need to count the row that's on the needles as well. You just don't measure it as part of your total measurement. You be quiet down there. I've got a little one down here barking in his sleep. All right, I'm going to turn this over. I'll show you all the beautiful little tones that are in this safari colorway. And this is more of a golden color. It's not really picking it up. We got some turquoise in here, some turquoise fleck in here, some purples. We got some rustic browns. I really like it. This is the yarn that I made my slipper socks out of, my Converse slipper socks. I was just thinking about them today. I was looking through my TikTok videos and I'm like, where did they go? And I don't even think it was a TikTok video. I think it was my photos on gallery. So I want to see if we have 1.5 inches here. And if you have any issues, not quite 1.5 inches. I'm going to put you out in the kitchen all by yourself. See this? You're going right out in the kitchen. There's no need for you to be barking. So, yeah, we have 1.25 inches. We have a couple more rows to go. You can also, if you're not sure how long you want it, this is a Knit Picks Journey Tweed yarn, and it is called Safari. It is a alpaca, merino wool, silk, and what is that? Donegal blend. I had got a little extravagant and spent some money on myself. I had bought this yarn simply for me. But if you're unsure how long you want your cuff, lay it on your arm. Okay, if you want your cuff to come back down here, and I know it's kind of hard to lay it on your arm if you have a flat needle, but if you have a flat needle and it's straight, just take your needle, lay it on your arm right there, and see where it falls, where you want your cuff to start on your arm. If you want a longer cuff, make a longer cuff. If you want it up here, that's fine. But once you get up here to this lump at the base of your thumb here, that's where we're going to start the thumb gusset. Okay. Yes, Arlene, this comes from Knit Picks. It is a Journey Tweed sport weight, and the color is Safari. And it comes in 100-gram hanks. And I think they were like $15.99 a hank, which is 100 grams. So yeah, because of the alpaca and the silk, it feels wonderful. And of course you have to hand wash this, but it's I love it. It's thin and it's warm. I wanted it simply because of the alpaca. I wanted to get it, and I bought 4 hanks, 400 grams, because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But I made my Converse slipper socks out of them, and they're lightweight, but they are so warm that literally I could wear those and not have anything else on my feet, and my feet would still be warm, which for me is absolutely a plus, because I get cold easy. Having a hard time picking up these stitch markers to get them out of my way so I don't lose them. Sling them around here somewhere on the end of this string. All right, I'm going to keep going here. A couple more stockinette rows. Anybody have any questions up to this point? Everybody doing okay with the stitches, following along if they're making this themselves as we go. And I'm a little rusty on the thumb gusset. I'm sitting here thinking about it, but it'll come back to me. And like I tell everybody, I do not edit my videos before I upload them to YouTube. Every mistake that I make on live goes straight to YouTube. I will correct my mistakes as I go. A lot of you guys who follow me, if I forget to do something, you all are very helpful in reminding me. I do appreciate that ever so much. Thank you for all the likes. I see the hearts just flying up the side of my screen here as I'm looking past to knit, knit, knit. Yeah. Everything that I make and demonstrate, unless I'm going to claim it for myself, which these gloves I probably will claim for myself, I do offer up for anyone who wants it for sale. I know I can't say too much about that on TikTok, but I am looking into opening a shop here on TikTok. It's a big decision to make, and it adds more responsibilities to my already busy life. So I got to think it over and figure out what I actually want to do and make it so that it's, whatever it is, it's going to have to be low maintenance. You know, if I decide that I'm going to do a market, it might just be a once or twice a year thing, and maybe have, I don't know, some type of online catalog or something, website. I still have to figure it all out. I like the look of knit work much more than crochet. Now, there's a lot of things I like crochet too. Most of the stuff that I do crochet would be blankets, or everybody calls it amigurumi. I call them stuffies. Anything that would have anything to do with granny squares, of course. And there's all different kinds of granny squares. All different kinds with 3D flowers on them. Lacy granny squares, all different kinds. We're just doing another knit row here. I'll lay this down and check this out here in a minute. And gloves, fingerless gloves, mittens, they're all under the same basic construction. You're going to work your cuff. You're going to work the body of it, the thumb gusset. If you're doing fingerless gloves, when you come up past the thumb gusset, you're going to do more rows to take the cuff as high as you would want it here on your hand. If you're doing mittens, that portion you would keep going for the length of the fingers and do your decreases to close it off. If you wanted to do gloves with the, all 5 fingers in them, or 4 fingers in a thumb gusset, then your thumb gusset and your fingers, they're all going to get worked out to length and then decrease to close off. Yeah, sometimes they are too chunky. Yes, I'm knitting these flat simply because I didn't want to confuse all of the knitters who don't like to work in the round. After the cast on, if you had double pointed needles or small enough circulars, you could have joined in the round, marked the beginning of your round, and worked your knit purls and everything in the round. Okay? It would have been the same thing, other than, you wouldn't have to do purl stitches because you have it in the round. You would be able to do all knit stitches. And it seems to work up a lot faster when you're doing stockinette to work it in the round when you can, because all you're doing is knit. You really don't have to turn your rows because you just keep working in circles. You just have to keep moving your stitch marker for your beginning of the round. grateful for Grace. Some people think that crochet is easier to do. Some people think knitting is easier to do. For me, the reason why I prefer knit over crochet, there's two reasons. I like the look of knit when it is finished. It looks, I don't want to say more professional because that's not the right word. I just don't like the amount of holes that are created in between the stitches that you can visually see with crochet. Some of the crochet. Not all of the crochet is like that for me. But for clothing, I prefer knit. 1. 2, crochet, because it has a lot of twisting of the wrist. I have issues with carpal tunnel. Knit is easier for me to do. It doesn't make my hands hurt as much. So yeah, I'm more likely to do something that is less hurtful. Cleaner stitch definition. There you go. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Cleaner stitch definition. Oh, whenever I find out that I have a lefty in class, I do my best to try and, even though I'm right-handed, I do my best to try to knit with my left hand so that you can see actually how it is. Now, I have never checked this out, probably because it wasn't information that I really wanted to look forward or deeper into, but I have been told by other lefties that if you face whatever electronic device you are viewing your videos on to watch how to do something for left-handed people, if you turn it away from you and set it in front of a mirror and you view the video through the mirror, it supposedly turns it around so you can see it left-handed. I do not know how true that is because I've never checked into it. But if you are left-handed, try it out. Let me know. Let me know. All right, we're going to see where we are here after this row, even though I'm still going to have to do the purl row. I tried to do all my increases and decreases on the knit side. So we're still going to have to do a purl row, but I want to see where we're at here. And a lot of the times when I'm making stuff like this for me, or for any adult, I will check it to see where it's laying, to see if I like what's going on. You know, you'll see me doing this a lot. I just want to see where that cuff is going to end, and I should really start doing my thumb gussets now because I think that's exactly where I would want my cuff to lay, right there, and this wants to roll. Okay? So I'm going to lay this down and measure it for you all who are following along with me so that you can see, and I keep moving everything around. We actually have closer to 1 1/4 inches right up underneath the needles, 1 1/4 inches from the cast on. Okay. 1 1/4 inches to 2 inches. I'm going to do one more row because the next row is purl, and then I will show you how we do the increases on the thumb gusset. Now this is going to come back to me as I do it, so if you want to wait to let me do it, I will stop briefly and describe to you again. That way, if I have to pull it back out, you're not pulling it back out with me. Ooh, I'm missing a lot. I hold my yarn differently when I crochet too. Now, I've seen studies, Andrew, that show that knit and crochet use the same amount of yarn. Grace, I am grateful for Grace. I could really confuse you guys when I do my color work. I knit with both hands. I have one color in one hand and one color in the other, and I'm knitting with both hands. I'm going to show you how to close seams up. That's another reason too why I wanted to knit this flat. There's several things that I can show you in this so that you can. I'm getting a sip of my water here while I catch up on all these comments. Tall trees. Over the last year and a half, 2 years, about the last year and a half, I have knitted my mother, I think probably 10 or 12 sweaters. I went sweater crazy. I think half of them I have posted to TikTok by now. Yeah, the Tunisian crochet will make crochet look like knit. There is also some type of slip stitch that makes your crochet look like knit when you're finished. Grateful for Grace, hang out with me and I will show you everything you want to see when you're ready. If I don't know how to do it, and there's things I still don't know how to do yet on knit, if I don't know how to do it, I will learn how to do it and I'll teach you. We'll learn it together. I'm all about being helpful and, passing knowledge along. I had to correct a misspeak on one of my videos. My mother, she follows me on YouTube, so whenever I put up a video, she'll watch it. And I can't remember which one it was, but I was talking about her teaching me that two of my dad's sisters had taught my mother how to crochet. My mother called me and she said they did not. She said they taught me how to knit. She said she was 11 years old, and a lady that my grandmother, her mother, was doing home hospice care for, taught my mother how to crochet, and her name was Miss Ratledge. I told my mother, I said, I will correct that on the video when I speak about you teaching me how to knit and crochet, and you learned young. And everybody says it's an old lady hobby, but how many of you learned, before you were out of primary school or elementary school? A lot. A lot of people learned at a younger age to do that. And I think it's funny because I sit back and look at it, and if I would have taught my children how to crochet at a younger age, they might have been crocheting, and I would have had more time to crochet because I wouldn't have had to chase after them. Maybe that's why they taught us at a younger age. I do not know how to pronounce your name. I am 17 and a boy, and I taught myself when I was 13. My son liked to teach himself how to do stuff too, and I used to encourage all of that. I would take him to the library and get him books on anything he wanted to learn. He taught himself how to play guitar. He was in a band briefly in his early adult life, 18, 19, 20 years old. That's got to be one of those alpaca fibers sticking out there. I went and saw him, play at an open mic night, and the group that he was with, they put out a couple of CDs. He wanted to learn how to draw. I got him books to learn how to draw, and he's just amazing at drawing now. All self-taught. All self-taught. I'm trying to keep from coughing and drink some water. I've got a lot of people who learned young here today. Oh, yeah. So now you're coming back to the crochet. Grateful for Grace. I haven't spun. I think it's really neat. I would like to go and see it, not on the TV or whatever. The waistcoat stitch that looks like knit. Thank you, Karen. I knew there was a name for it. I just couldn't figure out what it was. So this is the row where we're going to start our thumb gusset. We are going to need our extra stitch marker at this point because we are going to be increasing and making this glove wider to accommodate this portion here, because now the glove is only wide enough to cover this. So we need to increase to accommodate this portion here, okay? Andrew, have you spun before? I've watched people spin yarn here. I've watched them dye it, or, you know, spin it, dye it, all that. But I would really like to go somewhere where I can see what is unsound yarn. I've never heard of unsound yarn. All right, I'm going to knit over to my stitch marker. Unspun. Oh, you mean roving? Oh, I'm sure. You mean roving? Yes, roving. I have never worked with it, but I'm sure that the Red Heart Unforgettable is almost like roving. I have some here on the shelf right next to me. I can show it to you here in a second after we get started on this thumb gusset. Now, with increases, you don't want to increase too quickly. So, because we are working flat, it works out very well. We are going to increase on, let me count how many stitches we got. Okay, that's 22. 22 on each side. So we're going to have 20 on each side with these 2 stitches. So I am going to move my stitch marker back over where I originally had it. And what you do, if I'm not mistaken, you increase. We're going to increase after the stitch marker. Okay, these 2 stitches. So to do actually we're not going to do those 2 stitches. We're going to do 2 increases, 1 on each side, which means that once I get the other increase done, I'm going to have to do the stitch marker over here. I do an invisible increase, and I do believe it's called just a make one, which is abbreviated as M1, mostly a capital M. Sometimes they use a lowercase. There are little bars that run across. Let me get this to zoom in here. See this little bar right here? This is actually, let me pull this off here for a second. This is actually where the stitches are connected. The stitch on this comes through here and goes over to this one. So if I wanted to make another stitch, all I have to do is pick this bar up in between. Okay? So, Brooksy, what are you doing on here? Ain't you supposed to be visiting? So what I'm going to do to pick up that stitch, we're going to make a new stitch. We're going to pick up this bar, and I'm going to take the left hand needle and I'm going to run it through this stitch, through the bar from front to back. Okay? So it's going to lay it on there like that. Now I'm going to knit that through the back loop. This being the front loop, this being the back loop. So I'm going to put my needle into the stitch from right to left and up the back side. Just ignore that stitch marker. Up the back side here. And we're going to wrap it this way, same way, counterclockwise, and pull it through. Okay? Now I'm going to do these next 2 stitches, this one and this one. And then we're going to do that again. You see when I pull these stitches apart, that bar automatically appears. Okay, so again, I'm going to take my right needle and go into the stitch from front to back just to lift it up. Because trying to get in there from the left needle sometimes gets hard because you're pulling on the yarn that you're trying to get into. So then you're going to take your left needle and go in just the same and drop it off onto the left hand needle. And then you're going to knit. Sometimes I have to take and roll this back so that I can create, and it's hard to see, a little extra loop back here so I can get through. Okay? And I've got the stitch on. We're knitting it through the back loop. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put our other stitch marker on here. Okay? When we come back around this, only on the knit sides are we going to do increases. Okay? And we are going to increase right after this first stitch marker and before the last stitch marker on every knit row. We're not going to do it on the purl rows, just on the knit rows. Okay? So we're going to finish up this row with knit. Next row we're going to purl straight through. And then when we come back to the right side, which is this side, your knit side, we'll do the thumb gusset row again. This is going to increase that area to where you have the area to go over the extra on your thumb here. Plus, if you decided that you want to put a little finger cap in there for fingerless gloves, you can. Okay, which I always do a little knit 2 purl 2 rib, but I don't do a full inch. I might only do a 1/4 inch or 3 or 4 rows just to give it a little stretchy on the bind off. I have another pair of fingerless gloves over here, which are more so like wrist warmers. I can show you how I did what is going on here? Something just popped up on my screen about a comedy chat. Okay. I got a phone call and they paused my live and I thought I was back and I was trying to fix a drop stitch, but the phone call, I don't know who it was, so I just declined the phone call. Yeah. I'm not quite sure where I was on that. Next project, you're going to do gloves, Grateful for Grace. Oh, yes, I was saying, I do take my lives and download them and then upload them to YouTube. So this will be a tutorial for YouTube that you can follow later if you weren't ready for today. I really don't announce what I'm doing. I just jump on here and do. I need to be a little more prepared. But, you know, I'm up in the ages here and I like to fly by the seat of my pants sometimes. So that's what I do best. Again, if anybody happens to mention, hey, I'd like to see this, or can you help me with that while I'm in a live, I try to jot it down and who it is and try to get back with you in a message to set a time that I can show you how to do what you want to see. Oh yes, another pair of fingerless gloves. I'll show you how I do the thumb, how I did the thumb on that, because there's multiple different ways that you can do it depending on what you like. Hey Jonette, how are you today? Yes, if you go for my YouTube, if you go back to my TikTok profile and right above all my videos, there is a Linktree link. If you click on that, it will take you to every link that I share with you to access me or anything that I'm working on for class patterns, any of that. Anything that I think might be pertinent. I try to stay on trend when I'm doing my tutorials and things. I did show how to do a hexagon sweater on a small size, basic sweater construction on a doll size sweater, other things like that. But let me show you these other gloves while I'm thinking about it. I made these particularly to fit me, and these are made out of wool. And I wanted it to look like just somebody had took a bunch of sweater cuffs and sewed them together. And I think I did a pretty good job. The thumb, all I did was I worked it in the round. Once I got up to the point, I worked it flat, back and forth, until I got the area for my thumb as big as I wanted. Of course, it was on circular, on a circular needle like this. And it's just perfect for how I wanted it to turn out. So, these are just, and still I have to weave in all my edges, all my ends. But yeah, and I already have the, I think my dog's got a hold of this one. It's kind of fuzzy. The second glove, they're both done. So this will be something that'll help keep my arms, my wrists and stuff warm this fall. I do wear a lot of those. So again, this is the row, the knit row. We will be doing the increases on the thumb gusset again. I will show you that when we get to it. We will be doing a make one increase after the first stitch marker and another make one increase before the second stitch marker. So we will be increasing inside the stitch markers. Knitting back over here. And I'm glad I chose this yarn. This yarn is just wonderful to work with. I love the feel of it. It is a tweed, so it's got a little, you know, a little texture to it itself, all by itself. All right, slide our stitch marker over. I've got new stitch markers coming in. When I had to do that blanket, I did a boo-boo and ran both sides of my yarn through my circle stitch markers, and I had to cut them off because I wasn't taking all that work back out over 396 stitches on both sides, over 700 stitches. No, I cut the stitch markers. All right, again, we're going to pick up that bar that goes right from one stitch to the other. Let me bring it up here to the camera. You can see that bar that travels through. All you have to do is just spread your needles apart a little bit and you'll see that bar. Okay, I pick it up with the right hand needle first because sometimes trying to dig in there with the left hand needle, you're pulling your stitch back anyway and it's hard to get into for me. So then again, I take the left hand needle and stick it in there so that it goes in from the front to the back of the bar that you just pulled up. I will take and roll this back so I create a little gap on the back side so I can get my needle in there because we're going to knit it through the back loop. Okay, and then you're going to knit all your other stitches. Your stitches are going to increase by 2 every knit row. Okay, there's the last stitch before our next stitch marker. And again, all we have to do is just spread those needles apart, and there's that bar right there. You just go right down into there and pick that bar up. And because we're going in the front of the stitch like this to put it on, we're twisting that stitch. And because we are also going to the back, you can see if you're doing this yourself right now or if you've done this before, it tightens up this stitch that you've picked up. So you don't end up with a huge yarn over hole like you do when you do yarn overs for increases. Once I get a few further on up here, you'll see I'll show you the increase seam that you're going to have. It should be a nice, clean, even seam. As long as you're not pulling your stitches too hard, you know, or pulling up a great big loop on that bar that you're pulling up to make your new stitches, it should be uniform and even. And we'll have to go up a little bit further, or I'll have to move the stitch markers to the back so that they're not in the way. And let's see what it looks like when we get finished these 3 or 4 more stitches here. Okay, I'm going to put both of these to the back and we're going to take a look here. If you see here, this row of vertical knit stitches, let's see if I can find it again because I saw it just real good on that camera angle. Okay, right here, this row of knit stitches right here. You see it coming up here like this? See how it's kind of veering off here to the side? Because you're adding these stitches in here. And this row here, how it goes off over to here? Because we're adding stitches in here. You're just going to see that your rows are going to start, instead of going straight up like this, they're going to start spreading out. And that's all you're going to be able to see in that area, okay? Is them going to the sides because all of these, you know, you're adding those stitches in there. You shouldn't have any great big airy holes, no bigger than what is already there. You can see, I can hold it up and you can see right there was an increase, barely. Right here was an increase, right there was an increase. Over here, there's one, And there's one. The holes are barely bigger than the other ones. Anyone who has used a yarn over to make an increase, or even a knit in the front and back, but when you knit in the back of the loop, it gives you that little kind of funny wonky knit purl. But with the variegated yarn, you can't really see the knit purl, but you can see that your stitches are starting to track wider instead of coming straight up like this. These two stitches, these two vertical rows right here were the ones that are going this way now. You can see them. And that's all you're going to see. Yeah, it is hidden. Plus, the variegated yarn helps out a lot. Yeah, it's easy to see. A lot of the crochet, it's easy to see. Okay, so now we're on a purl row. We're going to purl all the way across. And we're going to keep doing this repeat of these rows. Doing your increases on the knit side. Purl straight across on the back side. We will double check once we get to a certain point. I want to make sure that we don't make it too amazingly big, because we do have to go up a little bit higher on these increases. Now, for the thumb gusset, for these increases, if you're working in the round, up to this point, you can still keep working in the round. Once we get finished with the height of the thumb gusset stitches will either be put off onto a stitch holder, or you can finish them off and let all the other stitches just sit on your needles while you finish that off. Normally the thumb gusset I will put on a stitch holder or run just some scrap yarn through, finish my glove off, and then come back and do the little, knit 2, purl 2, rib, close off the thumb gusset, whatever I need to do. I always finish that off at the end. For some reason, when I do things like that, like the thumb gusset, it's a small piece. I normally stay on the big pieces until they're finished and then come back to the small pieces, unless you have to do the small pieces first. Unless it's, dictated in the pattern, because it has to be done first. And I've been on here almost 2 hours now. Thank you for the follow, Nan. I hope that, I'm helping everyone and what I'm doing is informative. I know a lot of people come on TikTok because they're bored. They're looking for something to do. It's a big, it's not favorable for time management. But yeah, hopefully, I'm giving you good information, useful information, not just trivial little tidbits that, aren't very helpful or useful. And again, for everyone else who has come in, if you have something that you want to see, let me know. It is best that you hit me up with a message, because it is hard. Are we all back now? I got another phone call and then my screen went wonky. Yeah, Karen, I meant to, I don't know if I dropped you a message the other day or not, a happy birthday message. I think I tried to. Again, we're going to do that, make one. That was fairly easy to pick up. Knit across to the next marker. And again, there's that little bar. All you got to do is spread those needles apart and you'll find the bar in between the stitches. And we're going to do that, make one increase. Move your stitch marker. Keep right on knitting. And again, it's going to be close to 1.5 inches, 2 inches, somewhere in between there, that we're going to have to work that many rows to cover that space for the thumb gusset. I told my mother, and I want to learn how to do those embroidered flowers. And I've been watching some of the lives and watching those women make those gorgeous, gorgeous 3D embroidered flowers. I want a pair of fingerless gloves that are done in stockinette stitch. I'm probably going to have to work some of that rope elastic, that real thin, round elastic, into the cuff just so it stays, because the gloves that I imagine are done in stockinette stitch. They don't have a ribbed cuff. They are just like a straight little fingerless glove, and they are just awesomely decorated with all those little flowers. I am going to make them. I don't know when, but I am going to make them. Yes, Burm, I'm making fingerless gloves. I showed everybody the formula here. Pretty much where you can use this formula to make anything you want out of any type of yarn. You just have to know your measurements. Now, mind you, if you have a sweater pattern, even this can be done for patterns. The sweater pattern doesn't go to your size, okay? All you have to do is measure your size and make those pattern pieces to your size. You can make them longer, you can definitely make them wider. Most of the calculations for sweater patterns, the decreases for sleeves and everything, no matter how many stitches you put in there, the decreases are pretty much going to stay standard, because it's going to give you a nice even, decline or decrease on your stitch count on your sleeves. But yeah, that's what I was showing everybody, how to take measurements to make gloves, and the fact that the basic construction of gloves, you can start a glove, and after you get past the thumb gusset, you can figure out whether you want to make it fingerless, if you want to put 5 fingers and a thumb in it, or if you just want to make a mittens out of it. Once you get to that point to where you have to decide which ones you want to make, I can tell you, and we can make either one from this glove. Of course, because it's for me, I'm making it fingerless. But there's several ways that you can make it fingerless. Do you want it to have little finger caps? Do you have one solid cap for all 4 of your fingers? I'll show you all of that. And of course, if there's questions that you have about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, or if there's other things that you want to see, I can always set something up with you and do a live and show you just about anything. Just about anything. And again, I haven't knit everything there is to knit. I still want to try brioche knitting, even though I don't really think it's something that I would do all the time, or would even be interested in continuing after I learned it, but I at least want to learn it. Because something later on might just be fabulous with brioche. And I won't know that unless I try to do it first. Here lately, over the last year, I have been wanting to do a certain thing with a certain sweater, do a certain, edging or a certain pattern or whatever. And I've always come across what I want to do in another pattern. So it's just figuring out how to do it on what I want to do it on. And I've been pretty fabulous with it doing it this year. So again, we're just doing the decreases, the increases inside the stitch markers. So when you come to the first stitch marker, you'll move the marker, do the increase, work across the stitches between the markers. When you come to the second marker, you're going to do your increase right before the marker, and then move your stitch marker over. And we're only doing the increases again on the knit side. I'm going to stop and take a second to show you how this thumb gusset's coming out. Lay it on my hand like I do several times when I'm home crafting by myself, making things, especially if they're, adult-sized things. They're kid-sized things, I have friends that I can call and say, hey, measure this, or hey, measure that. You can see how now this is really, see how it's spreading out there, here. And again, you can see where your increases are. But again, they're not much bigger than the other holes. Oh, you only knit and purl? That's all I'm doing is knit and purl, other than, you know, doing some increases. There are many different styles of knitting, to answer your question, Burham. There's a Norwegian style knitting where you actually pin the yarn to your shirt and knit. There's Italian style cast-ons and stuff. It's a style of knitting that originated in a certain place. There is continental knitting. There's English style knitting. I don't remember which hand is which, but one of them, you hold the yarn. Let me get my needles here. One of them, when you do your stitches, you're going to hold your yarn like I do, this way. The other way, and I can't remember which one is which, you hold your yarn in this hand and you're doing this, or you're picking. They call it, one way is called flick because you flick the yarn up and over. This way would be called picking because literally you, where the position of the yarn is, you're picking it through the stitches. One's English, one's continental, and it's a style of knitting. As far as knitting itself, performing the stitches, I believe, in my opinion, there's only two stitches, a knit stitch and a purl stitch, because a yarn over is an increase. So there's only two stitches to knitting, and it's how you manipulate those two stitches that give you your designs, your patterns, you know, in your yarn. Now I'm just going to lay this back up here, and you guys can see how that's starting to shape that thumb gusset there. Okay, you can see those two vertical rows are just spreading out because we're adding stitches in between them. And if you pay attention, it almost looks kind of like raglan knitting, where you do a sweater with the raglan sleeves, because you kind of do the increases the same, yes, with the make one right and make one left. It depends on which way you turn your yarn when you pick it up. Oh, I love this yarn too, Karen. This is Knit Picks Journey Tweed. The colorway is called Safari. And it is a, let's see here if we can get this to come in. It's an alpaca, merino wool, silk, and Donegal blend. Hand wash, dry flat. It's the frou-frou yarn. So again, we're just going to keep continuing on with this until we get that thumb gusset to the length that we want it. I get these turned around here, right? And I can start doing some more purl stitches. I get my comments running back again. Continental and English or European. I've heard it called English style and continental style knitting. Burham, if you're going to start new, I would recommend that you don't buy any expensive yarn. Where are you on the globe? Are you in the United States or are you over on another continent? Because I don't want to recommend a United States store for you if you're not in the United States. I have purchased yarn here in the United States from a store called Dollar Tree. The prices have gone up since COVID. They're $1.25 now, but I got a 50-gram skein of chenille for $1.25. I've had some yarn over here that I've had for several years where I think it's either a 5 or 7 ounce skein of worsted weight yarn was only 89 cents. Still on the label. Yeah, I have yarn from way back. And I think some of that yarn is just because, you know, it's a brand that they don't make anymore. They made it when I was a kid, and I haven't seen it forever. Oh, Grateful for Grace, I will have to show you. I have seen that they have, my local one has knitting needles, but I haven't seen any crochet hooks. This, just chenille. 50 gram skein. It looks absolutely gorgeous. It is a super bulky, a 6. It's going to give you the yarn needles, the crochet hook size it's recommended for this yarn. Of course, if you're using amigurumi, you're always going to go smaller than what they recommend because you want to shrink those holes up. I used a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook for worsted weight yarn with amigurumi. But, yeah. And this is a premier yarn. So, yeah, I will not spend a whole lot of money on yarn. I just won't do it. I just won't do it. But they even got a link on here for premieryarns.com for patterns and stuff. So, yeah, Walmart. If you need any help with knitting, just hit me up. I'm here to help. Patterns, if you have problems with patterns. If it is a paid pattern and I'm interested in making it myself, I will buy the pattern and I will help you with the pattern. If it's a free pattern, send me a link for the pattern. The row that you're on, I have linked Facebook Messenger in case I need you to send me a picture so I can help you figure out, you know, what's what. I can do that as well. I can pick out pretty good what's wrong if I get a clear picture of what you're working on. Sometimes the patterns can throw me off a little bit, but I'll do my best to help you. You know, if you've got patterns in your yarn like cables and you happen to drop a stitch and you want me to help you figure it out, if I drop a stitch in cables, I'm starting over. I will work back to there's some things that my brain just physically will not let me figure out. That's the bad part of fibromyalgia. For me, the brain fog and the brain processing, the cognitive issues are some days unreal. But I keep going, I keep doing, keep crafting. Yeah, I have, I can drop a stitch right now and show you how to fix it. I know you'd hate to see me do that, but I could. Would you like to see how to fix a drop stitch? I always fix the drop stitches on the knitted side because it's easier to fix them on that side than a purl side. All right, are you watching this? Everybody's going to go, gasp. If you drop a stitch, dropping a stitch, for those of you who don't knit very often, and for women who know about nylons and stockings, if you drop a stitch, it'll run like a runner in nylons. It'll run all the way back down to your cast on edge. The best thing to do if you drop a stitch, which I'm getting ready to just push one right off the needle, do not pull your work. Let go of your work. Only hold on to it to one side, lay it down. Grab a crochet hook. I keep a crochet hook handy. I did put my crochet hooks away, but normally I have one out here handy. Okay, I'm going to lay this down so I can grab a crochet hook and I will show you how to fix this. But first I'm going to make it worse before I fix it. I'm going to make it run a couple rows down because I'm going to show you what happens when you pull on it. I grabbed another bite of zucchini bread. If you pull on this to try to separate your needles so that you can get to your work, watch what happens. Everybody's watching? And the more you pull it, all these little bars will come out. Right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my loop, go through the front of it, just like this, right straight in. That will not twist your stitch. If you go from the side, right or left, to try and pick it up, you will twist your stitch. And then when you work the other stitches back through it, it will be, one of them will be twisted around, which it actually twists it like that. And then when you pull your stitches through, it looks like you got a purl in front of a knit, but you don't. What you do, once you have caught a hold of your stitch, you'll see all of these bars from the previous rows that it dropped down from. Okay? All you're going to do, and I'm going to try and pull this back here and not drop any more stitches off, but so that you can see what I'm doing. Bring it up a little closer and get it to zoom in. I'm going to take my crochet hook. I'm going to go underneath the first one, and I'm going to pull it straight through. Okay? Come back up straight. All right? Go up underneath the next one. You might have to turn your needle a little bit, your crochet hook, so that you can get the yarn hooked on there, so that you've got a hold of it so you can weed it back through or pull it back through your stitch. Again, got a hold of my yarn. I'm going to turn it so I can go through that stitch. Now, when I put it back onto the needle, I'm not going to put it on the needle like this because it'll be twisted. You got to put your needle through the center front of your stitch, and it's back on there and oriented in the proper way so that you don't knit this and twist it. If you drop a stitch by accident, that's what happens. If you drop a stitch by accident and you come back through, you're always going to want to, every couple of rows, count your stitches, especially if you're doing increases. Okay? If you do an increase, like this here, we don't have 44 stitches anymore. We have 44 plus however many increases that we did in here, in between our stitch markers. So, make sure you're counting your stitches at least every 5 rows on the I would say 6 rows, because 5th row would be on the back side. Every 6 rows I would count my stitches. Even to now, I would count my stitches. Okay, just to be on the cautious side. This is something I made forever. I can make knitted gloves in my sleep, so I don't count the stitches. But count your stitches. If you notice, okay, we started out with 42, now you only have 39. You either dropped 2 or you knitted 4 of them together. And then you have to look at your fabric, front side, back side. Try to find your loops. Once you find your loops, put your crochet hook in there. And you definitely have to be, you see how I have stitches here and stitches here? If I dropped a stitch over here, I want to get that stitch in between these 2 needles like that. So I would actually find my stitch, put one of these stitch markers in it until you work over to where it's at, then fix it. Yeah, it is. It's very easy. Crochet hook. And you can't even tell. My tension is still all the same. You can't even tell. Now, if your tension happens to go wonky when you pick that stitch up, don't go crazy trying to fix it, okay? Give a little pull like this. Give a little pull like this. Work another row. Because as you're working your rows, you're pushing your stitches together and pulling them apart. It will ease that back out into the shape that it's supposed to be in. Okay, you don't want to pull on it a whole lot because you'll stretch all the other stitches around it. So, working it, pushing your yarn back and forth around your needles like this will work your tension back in if you have to pick a stitch up. And we're going on 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. I do want to be off here before 3 today. So this might turn into a fingerless glove. Of course, for me it will. For you guys, I will tell you what you need to do Once we get up past this thumb gusset portion, again, I'm going to do my increases here. I'm going to pick up that bar, knit through the back loop. If you knit through the front loop, you see how big a hole you get if you knit through the front loop? If I put my needle in here and knitted through the front loop, I'd have a huge hole. But because I tighten that stitch up by knitting through the back loop, I'm looking through the camera view trying to get my stuff in here. I'm not even, yeah, here we go. It closes it up so that your hole is not that big. Okay, so that's why we knit through the back loop. That's why we pick the stitch up from the front to the back and not the back to the front. It just allows us to put tension on that stitch because we had to pick it up and pull it up that way to tighten the stitches up. I don't like it when they say to do a yarn over for an increase. You know, unless it's lace work, I won't do a yarn over. I will change it up every single time. I don't care what type of pattern it is. If it's not meant to have lacy holes in it, I'm not going to put lacy holes in it by doing a yarn over for an increase. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Is that Misk? M-I-T-S-K, Misk. I don't know what to call you. And I don't want to just, you know. I'm glad that you're inspired. I'm glad that I can inspire people. I was inspired earlier on last year by someone that I had met here on TikTok. She invited me to her group on Discord, and I've met a lovely bunch of ladies, business-minded, you know, small business owners, all, you know, with the same goals, the same motivation that I have. And it's nice. It's nice to have a group of supportive people, whether they be women or men, that have like-minded goals. It keeps you motivated. It spurs you on. And we were talking about things that we wanted to do in the next year with our business and our craft and our skill level. And it's pushed me to do some things that I never thought I'd be able to do. I've written up a few patterns for fingerless gloves that I've crafted myself. I've actually got a dress design in mind that I'm going to be working on. So that'll actually be a piece of clothing that I have designed from start to finish and will make and will write a pattern for. I know it's going to be I don't want to say it's going to be a struggle, but it's going to be a fun struggle because it's something that I've really wanted to be able to do. And I'm going to have to break it down bit by bit, every section of the wearable that I'm making, the dress, and trying to figure out a way, instead of making it in pieces, to make it in one flowing piece from, you know, top to bottom or bottom to top. But right now it's still in kind of like the piecework stage. I've already picked out the stitches that I want to do and the styles. Yeah, they've knitted wedding dresses. I mean, they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I always liked my mother when I was younger, and I'm sure this was out of necessity. My mother used to make clothes for me. I'm sure she made them for my brother and sister too, but I didn't pay much attention to that when I was younger. I just knew what I had. And I knew what wasn't mine. But even into high school, my mother made clothes for me. Not all my clothes, but some of them. And I loved them because what I had was the only one. Nobody else would ever have the same thing that I had unless their mom bought the pattern and made it like my mom did. But because I was totally different than everybody else, they tried to pick on me. Well, as far back as I can remember, I never really cared what people thought about me. Their opinion was their opinion. You know, they were free to have it. And I was also free to be unaffected by it, and I definitely was. Because they'd pick on me about these clothes that I would wear, and I would wear them again. I would tell them, oh, you love my outfit so much, I can wash it tonight. Do you want me to wear it again tomorrow for you? You know, I can sew. I have sewing machine. I have patterns. I've actually made, and I'll have to see if I have any here. I know my daughter, I made both my daughter's dresses, Easter dresses, puffy princess sleeves with the cuffs on them, 3-tiered ruffles down the back, the whole shebang. Yes, I have made prom dresses. I made, years ago, one of my past boyfriends, I made his niece's homecoming dress. Yeah, I've done a lot of sewing, a lot of knitting. I was watching a lady this morning on TikTok. She was making one of those pom-pom blankets on a loom. I tried doing that. Oh my gosh, that was so tough. I don't know if I had the loom made proper, but it ended up coming off there without being finished. It was just way too much. And I was watching her tie off all of that yarn on that loom this morning. I don't know if anybody else was watching that this morning. It was pretty early this morning. Yeah, grateful for grace. I never really cared what anybody thought. You know, their opinion is their opinion, and it's based on their feelings, not mine. So, you know, that was their problem, not mine. But growing up, I've learned to get respect, you have to give respect. So I give respect to everyone in every possible aspect that I can think of, hoping that they will in return respect me. You know, I want everybody to live their best life. I want everybody to live the way they want to live, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Do what you want to do. Just don't expect me to live the way you live, because I want to live the way I want to live. And there should be a mutual respect there, because we all have free will to do what we want to do. And we should be able to do it, as long as we are not causing any harm. I do believe that we all want the same things out of life. We want a family. We want to be happy. We want to have a house. We want to go on vacation. We want to do things. Everybody wants to do that. Oh, well, have fun with that math there. They say you won't need it, but if you pick up knitting, you will. All right, you can see here the thumb gusset. We are going to get a little bit of a difference in the stitches because we are taking and making that wider. You can see that that's going on right there, right along here, and right up along here. So you can see that's nice, neat, clean, the tension and everything, and our thumb gusset's coming right in. And I do this a lot as I am working on this. Your thumb gusset has to come up over this knuckle because you've got to accommodate the web here. So your thumb gusset's going to have to come back above up where my ring is right here, right about here. So as you're working it, it's going to have to come up, you know. So we've got another about 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so that's about another 4 or 5 rows, and we'll be up to here. And probably we'll go ahead and finish off that thumb gusset so you guys know how to finish off the thumb gusset. Again, like I said, I wanted to try and be off of here by 3 o'clock. We still have over an hour left. Sliding my stitches on around. These stitch markers, I love these stitch markers, but working on for knitted stitch markers, they don't slide around your needles very well because they are shaped like little little safety pins. They end up sliding up on the needles, and this area is too narrow for the needles, so I have to keep pushing them back down. But the reason why I have to keep using these is because I had to cut all my other ones off the project the other day. I do have some coming. There's my increase. Knit across these stitches here, over to the other stitch marker, and we'll do another increase, and we'll continue on. I am going to check after the next couple of rows. So we don't want our thumb gusset to get too big, because when we fold it, I might check after this row. So when we make the glove round so it fits around our hand, if that thumb gusset's too far, it's going to pooch. Lego Master Addie, thank you for the follow. Yeah, I just ordered 100 pieces. I got them off of Temu. It is a shopping app that my mother's discovered. And I'll let you guys know the quality of them. I'm hoping that they're good quality. They're little circle, you know, the complete circle ones that just slide over your needle. 100 of them for $1. Was it $1.29? Can't beat that. You can't beat that. I haven't tried yarn on Temu yet. No, I have not. Now, there was an app that I used to use called Wish. It was a shopping app. I have bought yarn off of there. Of course, the shipping is astronomical. They had 50-gram skeins of milk cotton for $1 each, but it cost you $1 to ship it over here. Each skein cost you $1. So if you brought 10 skeins of yarn at $1 a piece, it costs you $20 to get it. That's the only downfall. I'm looking here and I'm making some judgments here about this, measurement-wise, about this thumb gusset. Okay, on this side it's going over to the web, and over on this side it's going over to the web. So I might do one more increase row, and we will probably work that thumb gusset straight from that point, because I am covering, if I lay this knitting needle down alongside of here, that comes right up along the side of my hand. And the same thing over here, looking at it from the eye, that comes up to the side of my hand. This is a measurement that you can make just by, you know, what we call eyeballing it. All right. You don't want your thumb gusset to be so big that when you have it here on this side and you roll it over, and on this side it is, you know, matching up with the edge of your hand. If you make it too big, like I said, this is going to be all pouchy and bunchy. So we'll probably do one more increase row on the next row, because the purl row is coming up next, the row after the purl row. We'll do one more increase. I will double check it again, because like I said, you can see how your thumb gusset, originally we were here, right along here. Now your thumb gusset, you've got this much increase. You don't want to keep increasing, because then this will get all baggy. So you have to keep an eye on that as you're working through. Now, mind you, if you're working a pattern for fingerless gloves, it's going to tell you when to stop doing that, because those measurements and judgment calls have already been made. But when you're making something from measurements, you have to make those judgment calls yourself. So you can do a lot of custom work, for everyone who's here today, I have been talking in some of my previous lives about starting a crochet along or a knit along. I was thinking about doing that. If anyone is interested, hit me up with a message. I am going to try and do a video and take a poll of everyone who follows me to see who might be interested. And I'm also looking for the times that you have free time available to do it. Because with the crochet along, we can collectively pick a pattern, either knit or crochet. And actually, you guys will pick whether it's knit or crochet. I can pick the pattern. So that way I can give a certain number of rows to you to do and work on, and we can decide whether we want to do it once a week, bi-weekly, if we want to work on it once a month based on schedule and time for anyone who wants to work along with this. That way I can kind of accommodate everybody, and you know, we're working on it together as a group. So if you have any issues, so if there's anything that you would like to do crochet along wise or knit along wise, hit me up with a message. I will keep a little tally because I do have a notebook that I can keep all my TikTok ideas that I want to do and that people have asked me to show in. Jackie, my mother did purchase some pants from Temu. They are like the wide leg pants that have the cat faces on them, and the ones that have the butterflies and the flowers that are really pretty colors. I do have those two pairs and another pair, and I really like those. So maybe not all things are good quality, but I do like the pants that I have gotten from them so far already. Thank you for the follow. All right, we're going to do, on this knit row, we're going to do one more increase on our thumb gusset, and we will take another look and see where we're at with the, you know, laying it on my hand here to see if we've got it big enough. I'm sure that this next one will be good. Again, I have made fingerless gloves that are ribbed all the way up with cables on them. And I think that when I did the thumb gusset on those, I did the thumb gusset plain and just, you know, knit on in stockinette stitch, let's put it that way. Knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. And I liked the detail, the extra detail that was given by the plain thumb gusset in the middle of that ribbed glove. I wish that I would have pulled those out before I started the live today. Did I pick up that stitch over there? I don't think I did. I think I knitted straight on across. Yep, I gotta go back. This is what we call tinking back. Because I did not do that increase, I realized that I didn't do the increase. Let me double check and make sure, because I might have. No. Nope. So to come back and take these stitches off, I'm going to look here. You can see this little band coming down. When you hold your string out, your yarn out from the back side on the knit row, it'll pull the back loop out so that you can put your needle in there and remove the stitches off. Okay. This is what we call tink. It is actually knit spelled backwards, and you are undoing your knitting. So it is tink, tink, tink. Plus it's also the sound the needles make if you can do it fast enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and tink back over here to this stitch marker. Make sure I do my increase. I'm just knitting away, knitting away, knitting away. And I really appreciate every last one of you who stopped to view my lives. Because seriously, without you guys here, I would just be talking to my cell phone. And honestly, if I didn't have any viewers, I don't think I would continue to do lives. I mean, as long as I have one or two, I'll keep doing them. I will keep doing them, and I will keep helping anyone. Trying to get to the back side of the stitch without a whole lot. I'll show you what I did right there. Sometimes it's hard to get into the back side of that stitch when you do that increase like that. I will put my needle in here on the front I'll bring it up here again and I'll show you. I want to knit through the back loop, but if you have a hard time getting your needle in the back of that loop, put it into the front of the loop, roll your other needle around underneath, and if you can keep it in there. I'm trying to watch on the camera view and it's harder to do it that way. If you roll your needle underneath, you can bring it to the back. I just did it a minute ago, but it's not going to let me show it to you now. Plus, we're crunched for time. We can show you those tricks later. Oh, what do we do? There we go. All right, we got our increase. We're going to continue knitting to the next stitch marker. And this might be the last increase row. Again, I'm going to double check. Oh, I'm sorry, Jonette. Yeah, go ahead on out. Come on back. We'll be here. All right, we got our increases. I'm going to finish out to the end of the row. And then I'm going to lay this back down and we're going to take a really good look at that thumb gusset, because you shouldn't have to increase it all the way up, because again, we are increasing on both sides of the thumb gusset. It should shape out pretty quickly, and then we can just, we're going to leave our stitch markers in there. We're not going to take them out. We're going to leave them in there until we do everything we need to do with that thumb gusset. All right. Now again, I'm going to fold that in half. I can do that on these cable needles. A little easier than the flat needles. Now if you have flat needles, you might have to roll your needle around your hand a little bit. And I'm going to actually show you it flat like this, okay? You're going to take the center of your thumb gusset, if you have flat needles, because you can't bend them around like I do, and you're going to make sure that where we started the increases and you start to get your V, that's at the base where you started on your thumb. Right here where that little bony part starts to peek out. You want your thumb gusset to start right there. And if you roll this up, and then of course straight needles, this wants to roll up on me here, but if we had a straight needle and we rolled our hand back, this might be a little baggy because you see we're back here now. So we've got it a little bigger, the thumb gusset, than what we need, because our thumb gusset line should be stopping right here, even with the edge of our hand. I'm going to hold that there and see where the thumb gusset stops over here, because we might not have had it too flat. Okay, and again, if your needles are flat, just roll it around the side of your hand, and you see my increase is right here on the edge of my pinky. We are to the edge. So I am going to stop the thumb gusset, because even if I extended my thumb out like this, I'm going to have plenty of room. So I'm going to stop my thumb gusset at this point, and we're not going to do any more increases on that thumb gusset. We still have to work that though up to past this ring right here. We're going to work that to about this point right here on the thumb, because we got to make sure that we clear the web. Because if you stopped your thumb gusset down here, it's going to be really tight, and it's actually going to pull the thumb gusset further up on your hand, and it's not going to look right. Okay, so it looks like we are needing almost another inch. That's about another 6 rows of stockinette stitch, 6 to 8 rows. We will double check as we go along. And I'm just going to keep on going and chattering along. No, sugar and spice, I am making this as I go along. I showed everyone I have a 7-inch wrist. I measured with a tape measure. I showed them how to break down your stitch count on your label to be able to take your stitch count multiplied by the number of inches you need to cover to get your stitch count. You can make anything, sweaters for anybody, increase sizes on patterns. If your pattern goes to a medium and you're an extra large, stitch count. You can change the stitch count at the start of a pattern that might not be sized up for you to make it your size. So that's what I'm showing everybody. Jackie, you missed the story about Mom's pants. I said my mom had bought pants off of Temu. Yeah, somebody has said that the clothing wasn't really good quality on Temu, if that's the same story. I have 3 pair of those wide leg pants. The ones that's got the cat faces on them. There's ones with butterfly wings. And there's another pair. I'm not sure what it has on it, but I really like them. They're light and airy. They're big and baggy, which is great for me with the fibromyalgia because sometimes I have issues with my clothing. My clothing will bug me so much that I have to stay home because I can't stand to have it on. I can't stand to have it on. Can I explain how I measure again? Sure. On your yarn label, whatever yarn label, specifically the yarn that you want to use, this yarn that I have right here is a sport weight yarn. Let me do this one more stitch here after this stitch marker. On this yarn, I'll pull the label up here. It lets you know that if you use a 3, 4, or 5 US size knitting needle, that it should give you 6 stitches per inch. Now, if you've never done a gauge swatch, you need to do a gauge swatch. If you're doing it for the pattern, you have to do the swatch and pattern, and I can show you a lot more about gauge swatches. But my gauge is pretty true to what they have here on the label. I do know that with certain yarns and the size needles recommended, I can do very, very close to the gauge that they have right here. This is very important for wearables. Blankets, this is not important for, other than figuring out how wide your blanket is and how many stitches you need to make to cast on or crochet to make it that big. So this will work for knit or crochet. Crochet, you'd have to come over here to the crochet directions. Okay, but that is on every yarn label. What I did was I measured my arm around my wrist, where a glove normally sits on your wrist, with a cloth tape measure, flexible tape measure, and it's a little under 7 inches, about 6.5, whatever that little other hash mark, not quite 6 3/4, but I rounded it up to 7 inches simply for being able to do the math a lot easier. Now on the yarn label that I'm using, again, 6 stitches equals an inch. We need to cover 7 inches worth of stitches. So you take your 6 inches off the, or 6 stitches off the label, multiply it by how many inches you need to cover. Okay, so if you tend to knit tightly or crochet tightly, you want to go up a size or 2 in your crochet hook. Okay, it's important to do a gauge swatch with wearables, because when you start changing your hook sizes, then you start changing the size of the wearable. It's very important. Okay, but that's how you would figure out your stitch count for anything, for a shawl, for a sweater, for a hat, for socks, for anything. Measure the distance that you want to cover, whether it's a round distance or a flat distance, and then checking your gauge on the yarn label. Now, mind you, if you're new to knitting, you really need to do a gauge swatch. I know nobody likes doing gauge swatches. I can't stand doing gauge swatches. I will not do a gauge swatch. If I have to do a gauge swatch to do that pattern, 9 times out of 10, I'm not doing that pattern. I just don't like doing gauge swatches. I've knitted long enough. I know that pretty much using that middle needle, the size 4, which is in between the 3 and 5, and I can show you how to check the gauge. I can show you that really quickly here on this. You have to have the needle gauge, and I got to go over here, and that got underneath my stitches. I got to go over here and get it off my shelf here real quick as soon as I finish up this row, and I'll show you how you can check your gauge. Now, doing this glove, we are working in the stockinette stitch. So when it tells you in the pattern, and I can write up a pattern for this too, I probably will. I've lost track. Oh, it'll talk about gauge in the pattern. And when you do a pattern, this being stockinette stitch in this pattern, when you do your gauge, you're going to cast on, and you're going to, if you've got that knit 2 purl 2 rib at the bottom, you're going to do that, and then you're going to do your stockinette stitch. They want you to do a 4" by 4" square, because most of the needle gauges or the knitting gauges have a 4" by 4" measuring space. Jumped up real quick to grab my needle gauge. I should bring this over here. This will work for knitting needles and crochet hooks if you're measuring in the millimeter. If anything wears off, double pointed needles like this that aren't marked, you slide them in here. If it doesn't go in, go up to the next size. This is a size 8. Okay. As far as your knitting gauge, you use this portion here of this knitting gauge calibrator. It might be a little harder for you guys to see with this. I might have to clip it down and bring it a little bit closer. But in this area here, this will help you measure your stitches per inch and your rows, which has a lot to do with your label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down here and try and lay this flat without stretching it. You can see here that I have 1 vertical knitting row in here. Okay, and I'm definitely going to have to bring this up a little bit higher. Let me see if I can't find a notebook to lay this flat on. Let's try this right here. I'm going to bring this up, and now I have a cake of yarn back here I might be able to balance this book on, so I can bring this up higher. There we go. Now you can see it a little better in the camera view. To check your gauge, you're going to want to do an area bigger than the area that you need to check. So you can't do a 1" by 1" square. You got to do it a little bit bigger than that. Okay? I've got a lot bigger than that because I have the whole project. But what you do is you take and you line up 1 knitting row. You can see all those little V's. That's 1 knitting row. I'm going to try and come up here to a lighter row so we can count these stitches in here a little bit better. Okay? Let me come over here to this because this has got a lot of yellow over here. We can count these a little better. And you want to make sure, don't stretch your work out before you do this. Definitely don't do that because you won't get... Let me see. I'm trying to find somewhere where it'll stay down and I can see the stitches and still show you. Okay, we have 1 vertical row right up in there. Now we need to count over here to this 1" mark, and we should have 6 stitches. Okay, that row's a little wonky. Let me straighten that up. There we go. Now we can see here the V's that form our stitches that are in here. You see all those little V's? We have V's right across here too, and we're going to count all the ones that go from here over to this edge. Okay, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is a little fat. We've got like 5.5 going on 6 stitches. It's a little bit more than an inch. So yeah, my gauge is pretty good. This is probably stretched out a little bit, so I got 5 to 6 inches, 5 to 6 stitches per inch. Now I did have to add a couple extra stitches onto there just because I wanted my knit purl rib to come out right. But that's how you measure knitting gauge. It's a lot to test. That's why a lot of people don't like doing it. I don't like doing it. You know, you got 3 different needle sizes on the back of that label. And the way I tested it, I made blankets. I made blankets in the beginning, and that's how I tested my gauge. And I knew I made blankets out of lace weight yarn, fingering weight yarn, sock yarn, worsted weight, bulky. I know my gauge on all of them. And it's very, very close. You see here? 6 stitches per inch. And I'm using a 4, which is right in between. I probably could have went up to a 5, but then that makes it more airy and not quite warm. But I know that if I went down to a 3, I wouldn't get 6 inches. I know that simply because of past experience. I've been, knitting for 40 plus years. So yeah, my gauge is pretty true by now. So let's move all this out of the way. Now, we've already determined that we are not going to do any more increases in this thumb gusset area. We're just going to knit and purl until we get that extra inch on the top here of our work to put us up onto the thumb portion. Lace and blanket, yes. Yes, I have done lace and blanket because I wanted a pretty decorative blanket. And it was more so not to be a blanket, but to be a decoration. I took and made a lace blanket, and I did almost like a double knitted border on all the way around. I did it on each side, and I mitered the corners, which was a lot of fun because you hook those corners together as you work them. And it almost looked like a picture frame done in yarn with all that lace stretched out in the middle, and it was just absolutely beautiful. It depends on how wide you want your scarf. If you like a wider scarf, then you have to figure out how wide you want your scarf, and then tell me what yarn you're using and what size needles you're using, and I can pretty much help you figure that out. If you want a really wide scarf and you're using bulky yarn, it'll work up really quick, or worsted weight. Or if you want a thinner scarf, you can use lace weight if you like a lightweight scarf. It all depends on what you're trying to do too. I'm a little more themed with my work. The Ronald Weasley blanket I just finished up, the backstory on it was a scrap yarn blanket. And I just wanted to make that blanket look as scrappy as I could, so when I stitched it together, the stitches are a little scrappy. The I-cord border on the edge, I think, makes it look even more scrappy. I like it. So I try to carry that theme throughout everything that I do. Oh, well, for me, if it's something worth doing, yes, I do have bad eyes. But I can actually feel the difference in even lace weight and cobweb lace. The difference between a purl stitch, just feeling on the needles, I can feel the difference. I can tell you what stitch is. Of course, we're doing pearls right now, but my mother's testing me with this, and she's done up some crazy, crazy knitting with yarn overs and SSKs and all that kind of stuff, and I can feel it. I can tell it. It's almost like, for me, it's almost like reading Braille for somebody who's blind. And I've actually sat and knitted. I'm staring out the window right now doing these purl stitches on here. I can watch TV. Will I post what, Grace? Yeah, it becomes second nature. Oh, okay. That's fine. I do post these lives. I upload, can't talk now. I upload them to YouTube. All the instructional ones. The ones I do just for fun, I don't do too much. I don't upload those. But the instructional ones where I'm showing you how to do certain stitches, or I'm showing you how to make certain things, or like this one, figuring out stitch counts for darn near anything that you want to make. Anything. I can help you with all of that. Yes. Oh yeah, I can stare at the TV and knit as long as it's, like stockinette stitch. Now if we're doing cable patterns and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, I have to pay a little bit more attention. But the rows that I'm not doing the cable patterns, because you don't do a cable pattern on every row. Fly right through and watch TV. Yep. My husband was watching me one day. I was knitting and I was talking to him. Of course, doing mindless stockinette stitch knitting. And I'm looking him square in the eye, and I'm still steady knitting, and I'm turning my work, and I'm starting the next row, and he's staring me dead in the face, and he can see that I'm still knitting, and I'm staring him dead in the face. He said, "How in the heck are you doing that?" I said, to me, this is just like turning the page of a book or stirring a pot on the stove. It's habit. What was that, Grace? Lace blanket. Oh yeah, I'll show you all kinds of things. I do have a lot of stuff that I have posted up. I did a lace weight sweater for my mother. It was done, oh, it was a red one, and it was a lace pattern too. It's in my TikTok. I also, and it's pinned on the top of my TikTok, it's an Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles skull blanket. It looks like, the video starts with a t-shirt. It was a commission piece. A friend of mine that I used to work with, she introduced me to this man who wanted a blanket made. And he said, can you make a blanket from this t-shirt? I said, do you mean you want me to make a t-shirt blanket? He said, no. He said, I want you to copy what's on this t-shirt onto a blanket. So that's exactly what I did. And it was a king-size blanket. Mushroom memory. Yeah, that's Lordy over 40. She's great people. Oh, you were talking to Burham. I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm not expert. I still have a whole lot of stuff that I want to learn that I haven't done yet. I had never done crocheted cables. I did a live and we tried crocheted cables and knitted cables. Actually, it was a class, my Tuesday class that I teach right here on TikTok. We did knitted versus crocheted cables. I had never done crocheted cables before. I thought in the pictures and the blankets and stuff, they look absolutely amazing. After I did them, I do not like them. But I did them. I know how to do them now. I don't like them. I do a class, yes. I do a class right here on TikTok on Tuesday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 10 a.m. We do an hour from 8 to 9 with crochet. And then we do an hour of knit. Sometimes I go a little over, but I'm off every day before 10:30 because that's when my husband calls from work to check on me, make sure I'm all right. But yeah, I do a class on Tuesdays currently right now. And then I come on sporadically. So anybody who's here following, anybody new, if I do come on sporadically during the week, I don't have a scheduled day, but I won't be on until about 11:30. We'll definitely start 11:30 or shortly thereafter. I was a little late today because I was trying to get bread in the oven. Zucchini bread. So good. But yeah, I teach a class here Tuesday. So anybody who's interested, I don't charge. I wasn't charged to learn. I'm not going to charge to share that information that I gained for free. I'm one of those type people. I will link everything that I use in class. I do have 2 of the books that I've been working out of a little bit. You do not have to purchase the book for the class. I will give you every row of direction verbally, so you don't have to purchase the book. I don't want anybody to have to accrue any extra financial woes just so that they can learn to knit or crochet. Oh, thank you, Grace. Yeah, if you do follow me here on TikTok, make sure you click on the little bell and click all notifications, because it's default set it to personalized. And if I don't tag you personally, you won't get the notifications. Sure, just be here Tuesday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And make sure you have a crochet hook, knitting needles, and yarn. It doesn't matter what size. We'll work with it and you'll learn the stitches and all. It might not be exactly what you want, But if you haven't purchased any yarn and you're going to go purchase yarn, Dollar Tree does sell yarn here in the United States. I don't know if they have that store outside of the United States. Of course, Walmart and all that. Again, I don't know if they have those out of the country. I've only been out of the country once to France, and it was years ago. I went with my French class in high school, right after my 3rd year of French class. We were over there for a week. Ah, hey Debbie, how are you? Do I have a pattern for a granny square cardigan? I did link a granny square cardigan layout pattern in my TikTok. If you go to my profile page right above my videos, there's a Linktree link. And there is a granny square cardigan pattern in there, and it goes from extra small all the way up to 5X adult. And I think the extra small is an adult pattern as well. It gives you, I haven't really checked it out, but it should give you the finished size of the granny square. So you don't necessarily have to do the same granny square that they do in that pattern. You just have to make sure it is the same finished size. And then you can sew them all together as they, as they show you in that little chart. I thought that was really neat to have. So that will always be on there, posted for anybody to access. And it is a pattern off of Pinterest, free pattern off of Pinterest. So if you want to, it might be beneficial if you don't have a Pinterest account to create one, because that's where I do get most of my patterns from, because they do have a lot of free patterns. And again, I don't want anybody to have to incur any extra financial distress just so they can learn with me. I'm going to keep your cost as low to nil as I possibly can, outside of sending you the yarn and needles myself, because I can't do that. Now, something I am going to start doing for my lives like this, starting in August, and I have to get this stuff together, I am going to have a giveaway every month. And it is going to be for the lives, not including class on Tuesday, just the extra lives that I do like this. My top 10 followers that TikTok marks as the top 10 followers for every live. Doesn't matter to me if you're one of the top 10 in every single one. Your name will get put in every time. So if you're the top 10 in every single one that I do that week, you are going to get your name put in for every single live. So you will get, you won't be excluded from being picked for the rest of the week. So the top 10 will be put into a bucket for a drawing at the end of the month. And I am going to be giving away a pattern of my own creation, the yarn, the needles, and possibly, I might even possibly throw in the stitch markers if they're needed for you to do that project. And that's what I'm going to be giving away once a month, starting in August. I will have a crochet or a knit option. You will not know what it is, other than the fact that you can pick your favorite craft. And I will be working on getting those together this week. All nice and neat and semi-professionally packaged up, because right now I'm not trying to go to Kinko's or Staples to have them print or do anything for me that way. I'll print it off on my little printer right here with some cardstock. Get all the yarn together and everything right here in my little craft room, and have you all set and ready to start a My Spot at Your Spot project. So, anyone who wants to, if you want to share that with your friends or family, brothers, sisters, everybody's invited. Anybody who likes to knit, crochet, craft. I have done some loom knitting. I don't do a whole lot of that, just to totally change the subject. But if anyone is interested in wanting to see how things are made on a loom, I can show you that. I only know one way of wrapping the loom. I know there's multiple ways. And I know you can do everything on a loom that you can do on regular needles, but I just like the needles. I prefer the needles. I'm going to scroll down through my comments here, and I'm going to check and see where we are on this glove again. All right. Petra, thank you for the share. All right, now that thumb gusset's looking really, really good there. We're just going to lay this across here, and we're going to see, let me get this back up, make sure I'm not moving it all the time. We're almost there, maybe another two or four more rows, and we'll be where we need to be. You can see I've got the thumb gusset here where the bone starts to protrude up on my thumb, and we are almost, maybe another purl row. We should be able to start on the knit row, the next row. Okay, so on the next knit row, we are going to take all of these thumb gusset stitches and we are going to put them on separate needles, and we are going to do what we need to do with that. Okay, so that way we'll have that out of the way in case, of course, 3 o'clock is quickly approaching. So I'm going to get this knit row done and the purl row done, and we're going to talk about the finishing up on the thumb gusset, and then we will go on from there. And as I talk about the thumb gusset, I will tell you how we will take it from just a thumb gusset to what I call a thumb cap, which is just the ribbing that is done on the top. And I'm probably going to set those stitches off to the side, but I'm going to tell you what needs to be done over those because we are coming up close to time here. And I want to make sure that I at least tell you what needs to be done on that part. And I think that I might have to start a little earlier than 11, or I might have to do a part 2 on some of the things that we do, simply because, you know, 11:30, 3.5 hours is not enough time to, you know, it'd probably only take me an hour and a half to do one glove, but stopping to describe, which I don't mind doing at all, stopping to show other things and demonstrate other things and talking about it kind of doubles the time that it takes to make it. And I need to take that into account because I don't want to keep leaving the live with an unfinished item, especially something that like this. So when we do this next row, we're going to purl straight across, and then I'll talk about that thumb gusset briefly as I put it off onto a stitch holder. And because I'm working it flat, it won't be a problem. I'm probably just going to put it on a little piece of scrap yarn. If you do take your stitches and put them on scrap yarn to hold them so that you can finish them up at the end, you want to make sure that you don't go too much, you don't go bigger than the yarn you're currently using. You don't want to take lace yarn and put it on bulky scrap yarn because your stitches will be all stretched out. I have yarn over here that I keep in this little bucket. Scrap yarn from where I clip off from weaving and ends. Leftover yarn, long pieces of yarn left over from sewing. I save all that stuff. I put it in one of those big plastic buckets that you can buy pretzels in, the cheese balls or the party mix. Yeah, I clean those out and I reuse them. I don't save all of them, but I've used those for yarn bowls. You can see my yarn bowl here. I got craft stuff in there, but sometimes the yarn bowl is a little too short for a bigger ball. Plus I have dogs, so I don't want the yarn rolling around on the floor. So I'll put it in one of those big buckets and it'll bounce around in there, standing upright. But it keeps the yarn clean if I use it for a yarn bowl. But I use it to collect my yarn scraps right now, and it's darn near full. But I'll use those yarn scraps for stuffies if I run out of stuffing for the amigurumi. I know everybody calls it all different kinds of things. I call them stuffies. All right, now what I'm going to do to make it easier to go through this next row, I'm going to preload those stitches onto the string, so when I come to them, I can just, oops, slide them all off. Okay, so all of the stitches that are in between the stitch markers at this point, normally I would go ahead and work these, but because I'm working them flat, I do this at the end. Okay, after I've got my glove seamed up, this all comes together really nicely, and I just take all of these stitches and I do a knit 2, purl 2 rib. Might do a knit 1, purl 1 rib because it's a smaller area. Still makes it stretchy. Be careful on the cast off. You don't want to cast off too tight because you'll have it pinch around the top of your thumb. But these stitches here that are remaining, I just do, again, repeat this cuff, but maybe do a knit 1, purl 1 rib. You can make stuffies on looms. Yeah, I don't know how, but you can make stuffies on looms. There's how do I grip my yarn? For when I'm knitting, I'm actually holding the needles here. I run tension through my pinky, so this is how the yarn is running through my hand as I'm over here holding it like this. So this will give me extra tension. Sometimes I just grip it here like this and have it, get a hold of it, have it gripped here in these 2 fingers for tension, and over here so that I can, wrap my needle, control my yarn. That's all. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get my yarn needle out of here. I have a sharp pointy one, but I want to use a blunt one because I don't want to go through the stitches. And I'll grab a little bit of scrap yarn here. I have some black that I had unplied, some black sport weight that I had unplied so that I could make eyes on my frogs that I made. All right, and all I'm going to do is just come up underneath it here. I'm going to make sure my stitch marker stays out of my way. And I'm going to pick up, actually not pick up, but I'm going to run this needle through these stitches right on the needle here, and get my words out. Looking down to make sure I'm in camera frame while I'm doing this. Just run it right up underneath your cable on your needle. If you're using regular flat needles, just right up underneath the flat portion of your needle. And it's not wanting to go forward for me because I've got it stuck in there. There we go. That way, when you come to these, we're going to knock these right on off of here, and we're going to take our stitch markers out of the way. Okay, I'm going to leave this yarn hanging here because that's going to hold those live stitches while I work the rest of the glove. All right, going back across this purl row, or knit row, we're going to knit all the way over to the stitch marker. And I might have to go a little bit longer today, past 3, which is fine, because I want to get this to the point to where we at least got a fingerless glove. I can explain to you mittens and gloves before I end how to finish them off. So I don't want to leave you, if you decided to make a glove with all 5 fingers, we're going to show you how to do that. But I'm not actually going to do it on this. Now, all of these stitches in between these stitch markers, I'm going to knock off. Okay, I'm just going to push them right off the end. They're not going to go anywhere. I heard a gasp. They're not going to go anywhere because they're on this black yarn. And what I normally do, so I am confident that this black yarn is not coming out, I will tie a little bow tie on here like you tie your shoes. Okay? And I'll just leave it lay like that. Now, I'm taking the stitch markers out. We're not going to work over the thumb gusset stitches anymore. We're going to come straight on over to the next stitch on the needle, and we're going to start knitting on the rest of that row. Okay? Straight over to here, pick up our working yarn. See how I put those two together? Make sure to hold them really, really super tight. Normally when I do this, it's one pretty fluid movement. I keep my stitches pretty tight before and after, the first two stitches, and then the next two stitches where you pull them together. That way you don't have a gap. And I make sure to keep those stitches tight as I'm working along. Not super tight, but I'm holding my tension so that they don't go loose. Because once you get done that row, it will loosen up. And if it was already loose to begin with, you'll have a huge, and you have to hold this together as you're working it too, you'll have a huge long bar in between there, and there'll be a big gap. And we don't want a big gap. All right, now we're going to be working this glove for size for our fingers now. I'm going to do this purl row, and then I'm going to try it on, and it will look a lot better tried on this way once you got your thumb gusset off the needles. Okay, you'll be able to see the shape of it a lot better. You'll be able to tell at this point if you did too many increases on your thumb gusset. If you did, I can show you how you can tighten that up a little bit, especially with it still flat. You can take your crochet hook and that barrel elastic, the real round, like a string of elastic. I don't know if you're sure what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know, gaps are no-no. But you'd crochet that right along where you need to tighten up, and it'll tighten it up for you. Do like a slip stitch across. And see how where my two pieces come together, I want to make sure that I do those stitches pretty tight and hold them together, because this is really going to decrease my gap in there and bring everything together. Now, mind you, once you do your knit one, purl one rib on your thumb gusset on the top of that, you won't even see that gap because it'll come up above that. But we try not to make gaps. We don't want the gaps. My goodness. Some of these names. I just got a notification from TikTok to invite someone to go live with me, and I looked at the name and I was like, oh no. The name looks like trouble. Now, folding this in half, you can see here your glove's already coming to life. Since you've got your thumb gusset off of here, you can actually try it on and see how it's going to fit. Now, I might have went a little big on the thumb gusset. It is a little loose. But when I come in here to do the thumb gusset, what we actually do here, and I forgot to tell you this point until I actually got to here, because this is when I remember this, okay? On the thumb gusset, when you go to start, when you pick your stitches up and you go to do your first row, these two stitches here, you're going to do a knit row around here first, and you're going to knit these two stitches together. This one and this one. This stitch right here on this side and this stitch right here on this side, you're going to knit those two together, and that's going to bring all of that together like this. So you're going to have an area that's going to cover the web in between the main glove portion, this area to cover the web, which is here under my fingers, and then your thumb gusset. So when you do your thumb gusset and you do your first row around, these two stitches get knit together and then go around. Okay, so that will bring your thumb gusset in to that point. And if I try it on my other hand with it at that point, it does tighten it up. So I had to see it to remember it. So it's kind of hard to teach everything about knitting unless you're actually working on something that incorporates everything, which there's no one project that I've come across that I could teach that would teach you every aspect of knitting. So that's going to shrivel up your thumb gusset. Okay. This little extra baggie that you have in to this portion is going to shrivel up when you seam your glove together. So you can see here I've got a nice fitting glove. I'll bring that over here on the other side. Okay, we don't want to lose our stitches off of here. So we're going to continue on because we need to come up to where here at this portion on the thumb. So we're kind of here on the hand. We need to come up to this portion here on the hand. So we're going to keep working until this comes up to this portion. Okay. Now I'm going to act like we're already up to this portion because it's 12 minutes to 3 and I don't want to end up 4 o'clock and still not having this, done. At this point, if we were up to where we needed to be on this glove, I would start with the rib. On my fingerless gloves, I always do a rib at the top. It brings it in onto your hand so it's not, big baggy. Like a sweater sleeve. After you've pushed it up on your forearm and you pull it back down, it's real baggy. Putting a knit one, purl one rib will give you that little bit of snug around your hand, but not enough to where it's cutting your circulation off. Just like the cuff down here on the bottom, you're going to repeat that on the top for a fingerless glove. Now, if you wanted to do a mitten, this thumb gusset would be done to the length of the thumb, and when you got to about right here, you're going to start doing a decrease on every other row, which will close up your thumb cap. If you wanted to make a mitten, okay, I'm going to describe to you what you're going to do. This part here, you're going to work, that's this part right here where your fingers are. You're going to work up to about right around here on your hand because you're pinky, okay, and you're going to start doing your decreases. All right, you're going to have to decrease at the beginning and at the end. No, you're going to have to decrease at the beginning and in the middle. So where you have your thing for your thumb gusset, you might want to put your stitch marker back in there where your division is, so you know where the middle of the glove is. That way when you do your decreases, it just doesn't decrease on this one side and this side is straight. Your decreases will go on this side and this side here in the middle. So you decrease one stitch here and one stitch here every other round, and that'll bring your finger cap in around to the tops of your fingers. And then here, once you got up to this point, you would have a flat part for your mitten, and you would just stitch that shut. You can use a blanket stitch, you could use the Kitchener stitch, mattress stitch. It would close it up without a whole lot of seaming. Okay? If you wanted to do gloves with fingers, all right, gloves with fingers, you would take this area. You would have to know your stitch count for this area, which should be back down to 42 because you took all your thumb gussets off. So 42 stitches divided between 4 fingers, okay, is about 10 stitches each, and you'd have 2 left over. So you'd probably put the 2 extras on your middle finger because it's wider, bigger than the rest of them. So every 10 stitches, you would do a finger. Now, mind you, 5 stitches have to come from before the stitch marker, over here from the middle where we did our thumb gusset, and the other 5 stitches would have to come from the back. And you would take those stitches and you would work around them. If you're working them flat, you would work these 10 stitches flat, and you would do your decreases. Okay? Then you would have to seam down the other side. Then after you got those done, you would go to the next 5 stitches here and the next 5 stitches here, bring them together in the middle, work them flat with your decreases, and then seam it down the side. And you would do that all for all 4 fingers. 5 stitches here and 5 stitches here. That would be your index finger. The next 5 stitches, and then the next 5 stitches after that, you would work those 2 flat together. Just like we brought your thumb gusset together, you would bring those fingers together after you did the first one. Work them flat. I'll have to come back and show you if I'm confusing everybody by just talking. I don't know if everybody understands exactly how to do that. So what I'm going to do, the husband is working again tomorrow. I'm going to leave this here, and I will be back tomorrow, and I will show you how to do these. If you cannot make it back tomorrow, do not worry. Both part 1 and part 2 will get uploaded to YouTube for future viewing. So I will come back tomorrow. It probably won't be 11:30 tomorrow because he will definitely be home by then. It'll be early tomorrow morning. So if you can't make it early tomorrow morning, don't worry. I will upload these to YouTube and they will be at your viewing convenience. Okay? But I will show you how to do all of them. So what I'm going to do while we are off the air through the night tonight, I will make 2 more of these. That way I can show you fingerless gloves. I can show you mittens. And I can show you, instead of just verbally talking about it, the gloves with all 5 fingers. Okay? This is done without a pattern. This is done with measurements off of whoever you're making it for and a little bit of math. Okay? So, again, I will make up a few more of these. So I will have several different gloves. And I will show you how to do all 3. So definitely, I will probably be back online around 6:30, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'll get this started because the husband's only working half a day. And he will be home by 11. So I want to make sure. It took us 3 hours to get here. I want to make sure that I can show you all 3 gloves, how to make them. And if you have yarn and needles at home, you've already paid for gloves, and you have children that need gloves, you can make them gloves, and you have no more money going out the door for gloves. So, I am on the East Coast of the United States. I live in Pennsylvania, so I am on Eastern Standard Time. Currently, it is 2:55 p.m. where I am. So hopefully that'll help you with Eastern Standard Time and how I'm Eastern Standard Time. Yes. Eastern. So yes, definitely 6:30, 7 o'clock at the latest tomorrow morning. We will finish up with this fingerless glove. I will have another one prepped up to this point so we can show you how to do mittens, and then a third one to show you how to do gloves. Yes, the links are all in my bio. There is no link for this because there is no pattern. This is off the cuff. But all the links that I have to give you access to me or any of the patterns and stuff that I'm using are all in my bio. Right above my videos, there is a Linktree link. Just click on that and all the links are there. So I want to wish everybody a safe day, a happy weekend. I'm going to go ahead and end for today. May all your stitch counts match. I'll see you tomorrow, and happy crafting.